right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you may be. Thank you for joining us. Another episode of Catching Up with Jacob. And we did catch up with Jacob, and he's on the other side of the Atlantic. Jacob Prash, good evening. How are you?
Blessings in Jesus. I'm doing well. Good to be back in England at the moment.
Amen. Well, good to see you, brother. And I'm glad you are well. And hopefully, you got some rest while you were on your way to the UK. We also have our
It'll
brother
be
Elon.
anyway.
Our brother Elon from Israel. Good evening, Elon.
Good evening, Marco. Good to be with you all again.
And I'm glad you're feeling better.
Oh, yes, yes, I'm glad too.
Amen. Yeah, by the Lord's grace.
Yeah.
Amen. It is already Saturday morning. Davy, a happy birthday to you from some of the believers that know that was your birthday. So you get to do it twice. Not only here in America, it is June 5th, but it was June 5th yesterday for you. So happy birthday yesterday. Happy birthday today. God bless you. Thanks for joining us today.
Many thanks, dear brother, and good to be with you all. Good to be here with you all today. Yeah.
Amen. And thank you for being up with us so early. It is early in Australia. So good morning to you guys there. And of course, we are almost celebrating a interesting election, Jay, but maybe some tears coming up. Good morning to you from Southern California.
Well, thank you. It's 79 degrees here in Southern California, and we are the very example of a true and free election and a wonderful democracy here in California.
Yeah, and we're gonna talk about the CCP, but you might have just say California. We were gonna talk about that today. So, it's one hand and one of the other. So that goes hand in hand. So we welcome all those who are watching in different parts of the world and different parts of different ministries in different parts of the world. And we are on different platforms. And you'll be able to catch us live now, be able to catch us later after it's posted and after it's been recorded. But we have a lot of platforms to choose from, including our own Memorial.tv, memorialtv.org. RTN carries us as well as X and Rumble. And of course, YouTube, Facebook, Telegram, Vimeo. And if I miss one, forgive me. I forget which ones. There's so many of them, but they're the many wonderful choices you may have. And we have podcasts and we have videos, and there's plenty to choose from. Bible studies throughout the week, women's Bible studies. And of course, we have Jacob Press's Bible studies on Thursdays and Word for the Weekend on Saturday. So plenty to choose from. Good stuff. Praise the Lord for that. Jacob, do you have any announcements for today?
1 week, next Sunday, on the 14th of June, we are to be at Bethel Christian Fellowship on the outskirts of Guildford in England. The details are on the Memorial website itinerary page. If you live in Surrey or the western suburbs of London, we'd be more than happy to see you at Bethel this coming Sunday. We have other meetings planned for the UK that will be announced shortly. But a week from this Sunday, we shall be in Surrey.
Very, very good. And that's coming up next weekend. So not this weekend, but next weekend. Jay, you got any announcements?
I do. Right now, available on Vimeo and on memorial.org is When a Nation Shapes Prophecy. And it's the long form interview of Jacob and Yehuda Glick talking about various topics of Israel, but most importantly, the Third Temple.
Ooh, that's good stuff. If you ever wanted to have okay, who do I want to talk to each other and have some questions? It'd be Jacob and Yehuda Glick, the really a great interview and some really good stuff. So don't miss out. And I think you were playing it earlier, Jay. So a little sample of that.
You got the preview of about 10 minutes. There's another 20 minutes available. So yeah, please. It's rentable for $3.99 and its purchase is $5, I believe.
What a deal. With the much eschatology and things going on that they talked about, I think it's really well worth it. Well worth the getting the whole thing. So, Davey, you got anything, or I think we're good?
No, we're all good. I would encourage you though. The interview is definitely worth the watch. It's a great interview, and it's actually I thoroughly enjoyed seeing the whole thing from start to finish. It was great. Yeah, good job,
I
Jack.
love it. I love it. Good job, Jay. Yeah. And I remember Jay, you being in the house with us. Actually, it was his house, Yehuda Glick's house, and we were there, and you were able to behind the scenes. If people can't see it, behind the scenes, you were able to direct that interview really well. So you did great. Thank you so much for that. So a lot of what you see is Jay's has his fingerprints on that. So in a good way, in a good way. So all right, let's get started. Jacob Prash. I don't live in 1989 anymore. I was a little kid when this happened. But today and yesterday here in the United States, June 4th and June 5th, it is the commemoration, although it is not commemorated at all in China, of Tiananmen Square. The protests of Tiananmen Square, thousands died. We don't know the exact number, how many died. Tens of thousands were arrested. This was the uprising in Tiananmen Square, 1989, which really has shaped the way the CCP looks like today. Most people probably don't think about that. But tell me a little bit about 1989, June 4th, June 5th, the tankment, and of course the Statue of Liberty, their version of it, in front of Mao Zedong image. And many thought China was going to change, but it didn't. Actually, well, it did, but not in the way that we thought it was going to change. Go ahead.
I remember it well. At the time, it was reported that 7,000 were killed, in addition to the tens of thousands who were, of course, arrested. 1.2 billion people watched it. 1.2 billion people globally watched it at that time, before social media existed as it exists today. Social media was then an embryo of what it's since become. 1.2 billion people, yet it was and remains the official policy of the Communist Party of China and their government that it controls, that it never happened. It's official government policy that it never happened, a denial of something that 1.2 billion people globally watched. There were Western governments and industrialists more than happy to sweep it under the rug shortly after it happened because they saw it as being in their business interests. This is what took place at Tiananmen Square. Since then, any semblances towards the democracy that George Bush foolishly said would happen have been sequestered. China has become more and more authoritarian, more and more of a police state, worse than it ever was. Initially, there was a social contract that was unwritten between the party and the people, that as long as affluence increased, the people would let the party call the shots, run the economy, and run the government, as long as they were benefiting financially. Now, this comes from the Asian influences of Confucianism. That is a very Confucianist mentality. Confucianism began to replace Maoism. Confucianism began to replace Maoism following Nixon's visit and the opening of China to the West. Progressively, traditional Asian Confucianism became the dominant philosophy. But then there was a reaction to this. When you give people freedom and affluence, economic freedom and affluence, that will automatically translate into a demand for political freedom. This the Communist Party could not allow. Additionally, what has happened since then, particularly with the shadow banking crisis, the massive unemployment among the youth, and the collapse of the real estate market, which was at least 30% of their economy, the social contract is no longer something that can be sustained. The government can no longer promise people prosperity, economic upward mobility. The government can't promise that anymore. So the social contract is absolutely gone. What you have is a neo-Maoism, a new police state. This goes back to the cancer in American politics. Nixon, for all of his faults, was trying to get China to pull away from the Soviet Union and somehow play a role in the downfall of Sovietism. At the same time, when Nixon went to China and met with Mao, China was equipping North Vietnam with the hardware to kill Americans in Vietnam. So Nixon was an unprincipled man who betrayed America to the communists. He absolutely did. But he could justify this by saying, well, we're trying to get China to be our ally against the Soviets. At the same time, Americans were coming home in body bags, killed by weapons and munitions that were coming from China or coming through China from the Soviet Union. So Nixon sold out. But the next big sellout was, again, the Republicans, by the Republicans. This, of course, was the Bush dynasty. The Bush dynasty has been an inherent political cancer in the United States since its inception. It's always been that. Neil Bush was at the center of the S&L crisis, the savings and loan crisis. Neil Bush was at the center of it. That wound up costing the American taxpayer more than the Vietnam War to stop an economic collapse. And who's at the middle of it? The Bush dynasty. After September 11th, we saw the betrayal of America by the Bush administration to the Saudi Arabians who funded and sponsored September 11th, members of the House of Saud, which was the Saudi Arabian government. Well, it was Bush who brought China into the World Trade Organization that replaced the General GATT, General Agreement on Tariffs and Trades. This was Bush. And Bush's ridiculous promise was these people will develop a market economy, and that will result in an increase in freedom, affluence, and move towards democracy by China. And opposite happened, of course. Again, anything the Bush family touches turns against America. That is their heritage. The naivety of Christians, again, comes into play, thinking that the Republican Party is more conservative than the Democrat Party. When you look at what Nixon did, when you look at what Bush did, when you look at any of these things, this has never been the case. This has never, ever been the case. Both parties have been traditionally corrupt, and both parties pandering to China. You see this pandering to China even worse by Carney in Canada. He's basically willing to sell Canada to China for $2.50, unless they can negotiate him down to $2 flat. It is absolutely unspeakable what the party of China is. And Tiananmen Square is emblematic of it. It is absolutely emblematic of it. The way a dagger was put into the back of Taiwan, again, by a Republican administration, in order to placate this regime in Beijing. Well, we know what that regime is. It was responsible for COVID. It was responsible for lying about the Olympics, lying about the islands that it has militarized in the South China Sea. It has lied about everything and continues to lie. And anybody who believes it must want to believe lies. But again, Tiananmen Square, it's the official policy of the Chinese government to deny it happened. Now, at the time, 1.2 billion people watched it on television. Since the internet, more people have watched it. Most of the world, or at least half the world has probably watched it. Yet their official policy is to deny it happened. And nobody's going to hold them to account. Nobody is holding them to account. Nobody.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Jacob. And I remember when it happened, it was so surreal. And I was a little kid. It was so surreal. And perhaps there were hopes that it would change, but actually the CCP has become more ferocious in terms of the way it handles the local people, obviously students, people that want to stand up against the government. That doesn't exist anymore. The Uyghurs, persecution of Christians, on and on and on, surveillance states, social credit score. And of course, they're allowed to come into the WTO, the World Trade Organization, since 2001. So it's dramatically changed, but it's not for the good. Actually, I heard Xi Jinping comment on the fact that the youth unemployment is so high. And actually, in a way, he admitted that one of the problems that they have is that people work too much and some people don't work at all. And he actually admitted that. And I think China has more social problems that we actually think. We actually think that there's not a cohesiveness that the party tries to at least pretend it exists. It's quite a bit of problems economically, but socially too.
and a bigger deficit problem than the United States, a bigger deficit problem than the United
Yeah,
States. And that's
yeah,
saying something.
absolutely. Yeah. Very good, Jacob. Thank you so much for that history. I think a lot of us benefit from that. But I want to turn to the Middle East, especially with Israel and what's going on there. I feel like sometimes I'm in the 1930s because, I see what's going on against the Jewish people. I see the anti-Semitism in New York City that is rising up. Actually, this week it was a pro-Hamas mob outside the New York City synagogue. There were again child being threatened in Ohio for going to a Jewish schools. In London, the son of a senator, Rand Paul's son, went after Israel and the Jews. Hamas desecrated a memorial of the Holocaust in Norway. They put that upside down triangle that they're known for that. And yet the fight continues against Iran. It almost seems like Israel's the real enemy, not Iran. And but Trump is in the middle of this. Tell me a little bit more about what's going on. Deal, no deal.
This has become absurd. Mamdani, of course, did not attend the Israeli Day Parade. He has endorsed a pro-Hamas candidate for political office in New York City, remembering that 1/3 of New York Democratic Jews voted for him, including a number of liberal rabbis, reform rabbis.
Women,
self-hating Jews. It's unbelievable what is happening in the demographic epicenter of the North American Jewish population, which is New York. This is what is happening. And it's happening in other places across the country, including, of course, Los Angeles, etc. It is indeed happening. And it's being allowed to happen. Mr. Trump, however, is falling into the very trap Iran wants. Iran can represent themselves as being victorious as long as they survive. Hamas will represent themselves as being victorious as long as they survive. I will tell you a true story. I was living in Israel in a kibbutz called Ha'ogen in the early 1980s when Operation Shalom HaGalilee, or Peace for Galilee, happened, when Arafats people were showering Galilee with Katyusha rockets. The main observation post of the Islamic terrorists guiding the rocket attacks on Israel was Balfour Castle, high on a mountain cliff overlooking the area around Metula and Kiryat Shmona in Israel. You can see it from Israel. I've seen it many times. And the son of the president, who was one of my Hebrew teachers on the kibbutz, his son was in something called Sayadet Golani. He was a reconnaissance commando in the Golani Brigade in Israel who took Balfour Castle, and he was killed in the assault. They couldn't get the tank support they needed, possibly because of the terrain, but he was killed, and it, of course, devastated the people on the kibbutz. I knew all of his friends who grew up with him on the kibbutz. They grew up as children together. I was there when it happened, and I saw what it did to the family and so forth. They took that thing in 1983. Okay. Now they just took it again. Why? Because you gave it back. You gave it back for a peace that was no peace. Mr. Trump is falling into the same game. The only way to defeat Islamic terror is to fight it the way you fought the Nazis. You must destroy it ideologically and militarily. You cannot allow it to live, to survive, and fight another day. It'll always rearm and come back. This is true of Hamas in Gaza. It is true of Hezbollah in Lebanon. And Mr. Trump's negotiations, stopping Israel from finishing them off in Lebanon, or letting Hamas even keep their weapons in Gaza. No, you must go in and wipe them out. Oh, you're killing women and children. Why did nobody say that when the Allies bombed Dresden? Yodel, one of Hitler's deputies, said you're killing women and children. And Bonner Harris and Montgomery said, no, we're killing Germans. You want to end this, surrender. This is what happened. You must fight Islamic terror the way you fought the Nazis. You must destroy it militarily and ideologically. If you let them survive, they're always going to come back and you're going to have to fight them again. And my fear is Mr. Trump is falling into the same stupid trap. He's kicking the can down the line instead of ending it once and for all. Likewise, Hamas is dragging out this negotiation, making a public fool of him in the eyes of the Muslim world. They're making a public fool of Donald Trump. That's how they see it. Okay? They don't care about their own people. What they care about is the American elections and the price of oil. We can keep the price of oil high. We can close the Straits of Hormuz. We can hold you hostage. You just can't hold us hostage. We can fight back and do this, and we're going to drag this out, hoping that the Democrats will get power, knowing that the Democrats will betray America the way Obama and Biden particularly did back to the regime in Iran. That is what they're hoping for, and Mr. Trump appears to be playing into their hands. I desperately hope I am wrong. They need to say, this ends, or we take out Carg Island and you resume the bombing campaign. That is the only thing that works. You must finish them off. Another one of the stupid philosophies of the Republican Party, and I know that Mr. Trump is not a mainstream Republican, but with the Bush era, was regime change, that we can go in and we can make a difference in Iraq or these Muslim countries.
Bring democracy and all that.
Do that, as I've said before, is to do what MacArthur did. He completely destroyed the Japanese military machine. He made the emperor come to him, and he demythologized the Shinto religion. He demythologized Shintoism publicly. Unless you're willing to completely militarily destroy the radical Muslim world and demythologize jihadist Islam, demythologize it, say it is a myth, the way MacArthur did with Shintoism. Unless you're willing to do that, you're not going to win. Well, the Bush administration was not willing to do that. They was sung the praises of Islam. That was one of the daggers the Bush dynasty put in the back of America and the West and of Israel, and of the Christians being persecuted in the Islamic world. You know, if you want to put a knife in the back of Israel, or you want to put a knife in the back of Christians being persecuted for their faith, the Bush dynasty was more than happy to give you the dagger to do it. Yet Christians voted for these people, thinking that they were somehow better than Biden and Obama when they weren't. Well, my fear right now is that Mr. Trump is falling into the same trap. If he does not stand up and do what needs to be done, take out Carg Island. We're going to take out Carg Island unless you stop. Unless he's willing to do that, Hamas is going to win. Iran is going to win. Win by their standards, not by our standards, win by their standards, which means to survive another day. His idea that only China or the United States can remove the nuclear dust. Why involve
I was going to
China?
ask you. Yeah, I was going to ask you about that one.
China is supplying ordnance to Iran. They're still supplying ordnance to Iran. China is helping them rebuild already. China is still buying oil from Iran indirectly through shadow fleets and overland oil transport. Why introduce China? I hope Mr. Trump is doing things I'm not aware of, because the things that I am aware of are red flags. They're all red flags. I'm getting very, very nervous. They're going to make a fool out of him if he doesn't stop doing this. Additionally, there's the problem of Qatar, who's every bit as belligerent, dangerous, and wicked and an enemy as Iran is.
Yeah. Jacob, you know his book, The Art of the Deal, right? You think this is he relies on it too much when dealing with very known, not only terrorists, but Iran are very good negotiators, even by his own admission. You think he is overplaying his hand?
You see this at Harvard Business School or Wharton Business School. They will read Sun Tzu, The Art of War. and try to
Yeah.
apply military and political strategy. I'm sorry, in business. Mr.
Yeah.
Trump is doing the opposite of what's done with Sun Tzu.
Mm.
He's applying business strategy geopolitically and strategically. Up to a point, it can work, but only up to a point. You have to know your enemy. There is a reason that Iran has survived and that regime has survived. And it's something we warned about here on Catching Up. It is a principality. It is a prince of Persia. There is a powerful satanic force controlling Iran. And Mr. Trump's administration is not aware of that because the Christians who are advising him are up the spout.
Yeah.
They're Paula White and people like this. He's up
Yeah.
against a principality. Unless you
Yeah.
understand the demonic or even satanic nature of what is controlling Iran and fundamentalist Islam generally, you're going to get nowhere. And
Yeah.
so far, Mr. Trump is now going nowhere fast. The fact that
Yeah.
he destroyed their army and their air force is not going to change the basic equation. The fact that he's destroyed the capacity to manufacture interballistic missiles and to pursue uranium enrichment short term is not going to stop them from doing it long term. You must get rid of them once and for all. You must get rid of Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and Iran once and for all. You must do a Dresden or you're wasting your time. They will win.
Yeah, I'm going to go Elon. Elon, real quick, regarding this issue with Iran and Israel. You live in Israel right now, and is this viewed differently from Israel's perspective in terms of what Trump is doing? Obviously, we've seen what happened this week. Trump called a ceasefire, very heated conversations with Netanyahu regarding going after Hezbollah in Lebanon, didn't let him finish the job. Is Trump strengthening or weakening Israel's hand in this war?
That's a good question, isn't it? Well, the fact that we have differences, Bibi is obviously having disagreements with President Trump. Well, that tells you, at least from the perception of the current government, that they don't particularly think that he is strengthening us, put it that way.
Mm,
Um, that he's what's happening is Trump is curtailing Israel's operational freedom to respond and to deal with the threats from the Hezbollah, for example. Um, so I would go with like Yaakov says. I think probably um, President Trump is being a little unwise in some of
mm,
these things. And you cannot allow these Islamic entities to continue. As far as possible, they must be eradicated because they're suicidal and genocidal, and there's no reasoning with them. Any kind of quarter that you give them, they will take it and use it against you.
mm,
So it's you've got to treat them like the Amalekites, basically. You
mm.
know, as so there you go. That's the answer I would give.
Yeah. So in a way, Elon, would you say the problem is too far advanced to deal with the way it's being done today? That means that there needs to have more, action rather than this negotiating back and forth, calling, we won the war every other week. The war is over. That's what you hear on
Yes,
the news, Trump saying by his own
yes,
lips. We
essentially
won the
yes,
war.
because you're not, we are not dealing here with I mean, like, even Nazi Germany, there were elements within the what should I say, within the government um that did not, well, they weren't suicidal. They were genocidal, but not suicidal. The
Yes.
Yes.
Nazi regime. It could be you had people there. In fact, they tried to assassinate Hitler a few times. You had people that that could see that this would not end well. Whereas Hezbollah, the Iranian regime, Hamas, not ending well is a feature, not a bug. You know, especially the
Right.
Iranian regime, blowing up the planet and destroying the West with nuclear weapons is part of their intention to bring in their Mahdi and all the rest of it. So, you're not dealing with rational people at all. You can't treat them, you can't negotiate with them in the same way you could negotiate with a Western power that has some interest in the survival of its citizens. They don't care about the
Yeah.
citizens. All they care about is destroying their ideological enemies.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. Jay, I'm going to go to you real quick. The Israel wants to keep striking Hezbollah. Their hands are tied, seemingly at the moment. But every time there's a ceasefire, Hezbollah seems to break it. I mean, literally, I was watching a video today from yesterday where the Iron Dome intercepted multiple rocket attacks from Hezbollah. So it's not working. Nothing seems to be working. These ceasefires don't mean anything anymore. I don't think anybody takes them seriously anymore. Israel has his hands tied. Trump keeps saying we won the war. It's just almost maddening to think that this is going to go all the way to the election period. Maybe it will be cut off sooner than that. I don't know. But what's your take on this?
I think if Bibi and Israel were wise, they would do what they need to do without the blessing of America,
Mm,
and take
mm.
and go ahead and take the hit. They're gonna take a hit anyway as far as PR, because there's always going to be a certain segment of people that are going to turn against whatever they do, no matter what the military action is. Go ahead and take the lump on the head and at least secure Lebanon from Hezbollah and eradicate them.
Yeah.
That's their option.
Yeah, it's but they have to do it. In a sense that they have to act on it. Otherwise, if you keep trying to buy time, it only helps the terrorists. Jacob, back to you. Some say this is Trump's 4D chess, 5D chess. I don't even know what they say anymore. I don't really care about it anymore. I'm just looking at what it is. But some say that this is a move to get Gulf states into the Abraham Accords. That he's playing the card of Iran as the enemy of the Gulf states and trying to get them into the Abraham Accords and eventually sign an agreement that will strengthen Israel. Is this possible? Could you see that angle?
That is his thinking. That is obviously his thinking. The problem is the Iranians are playing the long game. How soon will they join the Abraham Accords before the election comes to America with oil prices this high? He's stuck between the domestic political realities and the foreign ones. But I would point people to our webcast last week on Word for the Weekend, where I warned about the Abraham Accords. Again, this too closely approximates almost the Antichrist bringing a false peace to the Middle East. I'm not saying that the Abraham Accords is it, but I am saying it's a step in that direction. Absolutely. The same as independent AI is a step towards Revelation 13, the image of the beast. Well, the Abraham Accords is definitely a step towards the Antichrist agenda in Daniel 10. I don't think Mr. Trump is aware of that, but I don't think that he's being advised by sensible, biblically knowledgeable Christians either, who will make him aware of that. This is the reality of the situation.
Yeah, I'm going to go to Elon. Elon, real quick, the situation in Israel, a couple of things. So this is like more of maybe a three-pronged type of statement is the Haredis, and of course they're turning more and more violent against now court justices and what's going on there with the Supreme Court in Israel. The second one is, of course, what's going on in the West Bank, at least Judea and Samaria, as I call it, what the world calls it, West Bank. And some of the tax benefits that are going there, some of the propositions that are saying, well, the government is taking care of the West Bank, not the northern Galilean communities that have suffered so much under Hezbollah. And that's an issue that Netanyahu needs to deal with, especially with a Knesset that's going to be dissolved and perhaps September or October, you're
Yeah.
going to have elections. So you can tackle any of those, all three of them if you want, but especially what it means for the election and maybe they're going to dissolve the Knesset before we
Hmm.
know it.
Well, yeah, I mean, when we moved here, there were certain tax breaks available because we lived quite close to the northern border. We're only maybe 5 or 6 kilometers away or something like that.
Wow.
Um, but it's more, but th those have been eroded over time and are reduced, I think.
Yeah.
Um, but I would imagine, but I don't know how that applies to the further north. I mean, you've got
Mm.
Mutula, you've got Kiryat Shmona, and places like that. Much
Uh-huh.
because we're the northernmost coastal point, but of course, the border goes in and then up.
Inland. Yeah.
And you've got this kind of spoon shape, which is the northern, more internal, more inland. So the idea of these tax breaks was to help, obviously, because of you're being shelled, is to make the areas more appealing to move to, of course. And the government wants more people to move not only into the west, the Judea and Samaria now, but also the Galilee. There's a
Yeah.
definite government thrust to change the demographics in these areas. So, um, which is I don't know if they'll increase the the tax break in the north or not. I mean, yeah, it does seem a little bit unequal. You do get more rockets. I mean, Kiryat Shmona, Metula, and places like that are very close to the northern border. They get anti-tank missiles shot at people's houses, and that's direct fire. Um, so it could be a bit scary up there, actually. Um, but it makes houses cheaper to buy, on the other hand.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
mean they're calling it the abandoned North, meaning that Netanyahu's administration is abandoning the North in exchange for votes in Judea and Samaria, which I think Smotrich is from there. Yeah, I think Smotrich is from there. So
yeah.
there's been quite of
Well,
an accusation of choosing one over the other, even though it could be more threatening up in the North.
I would yes. I mean, I don't know if BB is particularly deliberately doing that in order to, well, I mean, look, he's a very canny politician. And on the whole, the kind of people that would move into Judea and Samaria, you're more likely to find the religious Zionist camp moving in there because
Hmm.
for them it's a mitzvah to settle the heartland of Israel. So you get
Hmm.
a lot. I think you're on the whole. I think you get a lot more um, demographically, a lot more of that of people from that sector. So maybe so so perhaps you could say that that would be a block that Bibi wants to encourage to support him in the future.
Right.
Definitely, but I don't know if he's willfully neglecting the North because, as we pointed out in the Israel report about 2 weeks ago, there are government initiatives to really, really bring a lot more people up here. They want to develop it because the Galilee has a much larger Arab population than Jewish population here, and they want to redress that partly for security needs as well. So maybe he's being wrongfully accused, possibly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
These are just perspectives that people have is, whenever somebody doesn't
yes,
get something, they automatically, feel like they're victims. They say, hey, we used to get these kinds of tax breaks. Now we're not. Smotrich lives in that area, let's
yes.
say Judea and Samaria, and now they're getting
I
all the
mean,
money or the tax breaks.
I wouldn't object if they want to give us another tax break. Yeah, put it that way. But it would sweeten it for people who want to move to the north because the center of the country is very expensive.
Hmm.
But it is cheaper to buy a home in Judea and Samaria, and it's cheaper to buy one in the north.
Hmm.
So It would.
There you have it. Yeah, I was going to ask Jacob. Jacob, your thoughts on the Haredis and how they're becoming more and more demanding and even violent in regards to it could be, as one ex-justice said, it could lead to civil war. It could lead to murder of a judge. They attacked the home of a judge just recently. This is not the first time they've been like this, but it's increasingly as the election gets closer and things get heated, they can wield a lot of power in the next election.
There are three factors that need to be taken into account to understand these people. One, inside Israel, the Haredis, the ultra-Orthodox and the Hasidic sects, look upon secular Israelis the way that they look upon Gentiles in the diaspora. There's a cultural religious hostility towards them, and the Gentile is replaced by the secular Israeli in Israel. That's how they look down upon them. They'll hide behind them, let them fight for them, but they'll expect the others to subsidize them to study in yeshivas and protect them while they hide under the desk in the yeshiva. But that is how they look. You're an inferior Jew to us. God is giving us favor over you. That is the mentality of the ultra-Orthodox. Second is the demographic. Israel has the highest birth rate of any developed nation in the world. You need 2.1 children per couple to maintain the existing demographic. Because of the abortion rate and the lower birth rate, it's going down in every developed country, causing a reliance on immigration, which is not always favorable. Israel is the exception. They have a birth rate of 3.2 children per couple, and it's because of the Haredis. It's because of the Adukim, the ultra-Orthodox. They know that demographically the future is theirs. And the people in the Hasidic sects will vote for who they're told to vote for. The Rebbes, their tzaddiks, will tell them who to vote for. They'll vote for whoever they're told to vote for. They'll be used the same way as black people in America. Not all, but most blacks will vote for whoever they're told to vote for, by Sharpton or by Obama. They'll vote for whoever they're told to vote for. That's the next thing you've got to understand about them. They know that they are holding the cards politically. It can only stay a demographic Jewish majority with them because of their birth rate. That is the next thing you need to understand about them. They are also vehemently anti-Jewish believers, anti-Christian, but they have a particular hatred for Jewish believers and will persecute them and use the law to do it through their political influence if they're able to. That is another factor concerning them. Not least of all, with these people is, in addition to their importance politically and demographically, they have a loyalty to their own religious identity that supersedes any other loyalty, including national loyalty. They look to the Rebbe, their rabbis, as the guru, and they are very similar to Hamas and Hezbollah in the way they think. Very similar. The way that Hamas and Hezbollah want to implement Sharia as a legal system, as the civil legal system, replace civil law and democracy with Sharia, so too the ultra-Orthodox want to replace civil democracy with halakha. They want to make halakha, the law of the land, the same as the Muslims want to make Sharia the law of the land. People have to understand they're just as anti-Christian, just as deranged as radical Muslims. Now, I'm not saying they're all like that, but certainly the Hasidic sects have to be viewed that way. They must be viewed that way. On top of that, they're superstitious. They're Kabbalists. They believe in Kabbalah. They're really governed by a superstitious reinterpretation of Islam, of Christianity and of Islam they hate, but of Judaism. Their view of Judaism is based on things the Torah actually forbids. I mean necromancy. I mean reincarnation. They believe in the reincarnated spirit of the Baal Shem Tov dwells in their rabbi or their rebbe. I mean astrology. I mean numerology.
Wow.
Occult, Kabbalah is a cult. It's Babylonian Gnosticism in its origin put into Jewish terminology. They're occultists. They're occult practitioners, all of them. So you have people who are not only driven by a religious ideology, but who are deceived by occult practices, thinking it to be Judaism when it is contrary to Judaism. This is what you are up against. And they know that demographically, they're holding the cards because of the lower birth rate among secular Israelis and because of the high abortion rate among secular Israelis. They have the political future and they know it. And they can call the shots. They can negotiate their seats in a coalition government, their membership in a coalition government, to extract the concessions they want. They engage in political blackmail, open political blackmail, which has caused a tremendous schism between the secular and the religious elements of society.
And there's nothing they can do about that right now, the secular part of it or the government leaders, because they need them, don't they? They need them in the coalition.
They need them. Can you imagine? Wow. I have my math exams. I'm finishing my degree in physics. I have my exams coming up next month. Tough. The Army needs you for reserve duty. That's your problem. When a yeshiva boy can sit in a yeshiva and not have to go to the Army, and get subsidized for doing it,
Incredible.
Remember, of the 50 or so, and I'm pushing it, say 40 to 50 democracies in the world, Israel is the only one that denies freedom of religion to Jews. Mm-hmm. You can be an anti-Zionist Septemart rabbi, an anti-Zionist Agudah Israel rabbi. Be subsidized. Have your yeshiva subsidized, your synagogue subsidized by the Israeli taxpayer, even though you're an anti-Zionist. Okay? You can actually do that. Mm-hmm. Be a rabbi, a reformed rabbi, a conservative rabbi. They can't even be rabbis in Israel. They cannot perform passage or any kind of civil function that is a rite of passage. Only an Orthodox rabbi can perform a wedding. Only an Orthodox rabbi can sign a burial certificate. Any of these things. They control the Hevra Kedisha. They control even what happens to dead bodies and burials and funerals. They control all of these things. They control most of the education system to some degree. And some of it they control completely. They negotiate the relatively smaller number of seats that are growing, however, for a disproportionate amount of power and influence. And they get it. They have also, since someone called Joseph Berg had a grip on the Ministry of Interior that controls things like immigration, they've had a strong grip on the Misrad HaPanim, the Ministry of Immigration in Israel. And they retain it. And they retain it, much to the frustration of secular Israelis. Hmm. Perhaps Elon would like to comment further.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Elon about the fact that these groups, Elon, become more and more radical against Christians, against Messianic believers, of course, and they, with that kind of power, they wield that kind of power, persecution may arise.
Yeah, well, you have to look at somewhere like Arad, where they have a lot of. There's the Gur Hasidim, and they've given I mean, there has been some degree of violence down there against believers, and certainly there was a nasty campaign against. There was a mayor they had a few years back that was, what's the word? A little more favourable towards believers, or at least tried to be fair. And he was hounded horribly by the religious, and I think particularly the Gord were involved with that, if I remember correctly.
Wow.
So they can make life difficult. And on the one hand, I do like the idea that the country's moving more to the right, and but the Haredim are they're not the same as the religious Zionists. It's far more cultic. A lot of these Haredi movements, because they just follow what the Rebbe says. They vote that way. In some ways, it's rather like the Muslims. As Yaakov said, some of the way that they think and the way they operate works the same. And it's a little disturbing, the thought that that the demographic future might be uh, more like the Haredim and not like the religious Zionists, for example. So it's a bit of a two-edged sword, really. The right would move, and the move to the country being more religious is, in one sense, a good thing. On the other hand, you've got these extremist elements and who can often be violent.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Yeah. Jacob, I'm going to move a little bit closer to you. We talked about Israel and what's going on there, a little closer to you, about an hour, let's say an hour and 10 minutes, perhaps, from where you are, Southampton, that terrible, terrible situation with the murder of Henry Novak. And of course, he was murdered on December 3rd, 2025. The information started coming out as the case opened up against its murderer, Vikram Digwa, who's a Sikh who murdered an 18-year-old because of a religious slur, he says. And the body cam footage was released, and Henry Novak was on the ground after being stabbed in his heart in several places. And he was dying, and the police handcuffed him, dragged him through the gravel while they did not believe that he had stabbed, and basically said he was under arrest. He of course, passed away of a fatal chest wound, and now it's sparked a huge controversy, not only a protest against the police and against Starmer government, who has not said a word about this, who basically are just calling everybody who protests as hijackers of something of a murder, and then using it against his administration. But now you're there, you got a little bit of pulse, a little bit of a better pulse on the situation. Explain to me not only your personal thoughts, but how you see the UK and England moving forward with this.
I arrived by ship in Southampton this morning. I was in Southampton earlier today.
Oh,
That's where I arrived. Let me just begin, first of all, preface my response by pointing out one or two things concerning the Sikhs. Moriel has had opposition from radical Sikhs in India. We have two churches there. We've had problems, we've had opposition, and we still do, for which we've asked for prayers. There are radical Sikhs, but the radical Sikhs are angry that Sikhs are becoming Christians, obviously. Sikhs can be understood as monotheistic Hindus who are very antagonistic to Islam. Their traditional enemies, the Muslims. In Britain and America, Canada, Sikhs do not tend to be anti-Christian, only in India. They tend to be more tolerant in the United States, Great Britain, where there's a lot of Sikhs, and in Canada, where there's a fair number. They are more tolerant of Christians. They're not particularly known for being anti-Semitic. They have certain hostilities towards Hindus in some cases. The assassins of Gandhi, Indira Gandhi, and her son, she was killed by Sikh bodyguards, by Sikhs. She was a Hindu who was killed by Sikhs. So it's a problem in India, but it's not so much a problem outside of India. The Sikh who was convicted of murder, he did not have the traditional ceremonial knife. He had a knife that was much longer and much bigger. But the very fact that they're allowed to carry these knives, when people in Scotland cannot wear skidoos, that's a knife they put in their sock. But Sikhs can't have such a blade. Right. As an injustice in itself. Two different standards. However, the Sikh community pointed out that this guy was a known liar and he was a dissident within the Sikh temple. His own community said he was a bad person. And they disowned him. They said he made problems within their temple and within their community. I could not fairly indict all Sikhs or see him as representative of Sikhs the way I could see a radical Muslim as representative of most Muslims. That should be pointed out in fairness. Nonetheless, we have it openly documented that the British government, the Starmer government particularly, has established a two-tier system of law enforcement. One for white people and one for non-whites. I'm reminded of one of the things that George Orwell stated. He said, when you try to use left-wing politics, the political left tries to level the playing field by the means they do not level the playing field. They simply reverse the power structure. In other words, some pigs, all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. The only thing you've done is stop the suppression of the minorities by suppression of white people. It's exactly what Orwell said. In Judaism, Jewish philosophy from the scripture, this is known as Evet Kimloch. Evet Kimloch. When a slave becomes a master, he becomes more oppressive than the old master. This is what you see happening in Britain. An established two-tier justice system, an established two-tier system of police. This guy gets stabbed. He's accused of having made a racist attack on a Sikh. No evidence that he ever did it. No evidence that he ever did such a thing. None. Absolutely no proof whatsoever that he did it. The Sikh's mother took the knife away and broke the law herself, trying to cover up the evidence.
Yes.
The brother calls the police and says, we're the victim of a racist attack. The police come. This guy whose parents were immigrants from Poland is on the ground bleeding to death. He suffered a pneumothorax, a puncture of the lung tissue, the lung wall with a knife blade, and the blood is seeping into the pleural cavity. The guy is, in other words, drowning on blood. He's there and he's saying he can't breathe. He tells the police, I was stabbed, and the cop says, I don't think you were, and handcuffs him and reads him his rights when he's laying there bleeding to death. This corrupt cop who ought to die in prison, both of them should die in prison, handcuffed this guy instead of checking if he was actually injured. A policewoman came and they pulled up his shirt and they found that he was telling the truth. After they'd handcuffed this guy when he was pleading for help, he was bleeding to death from pneumothorax. He couldn't breathe. Blood had entered the pleural cavity, and he was handcuffed and read his rights. That is what these corrupt cops did. But it was not just the corruption of these two cops. It's the corruption of the British government and their system.
Yes. No.
Can you imagine a man bleeding to death? The cop says, we don't believe you. And then they handcuff him and read him his rights when he's bleeding to death because of an allegation without any witnesses.
Yeah. Unreal.
Made by somebody who the Sikh community itself says is a disreputable character and a liar.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Ela, I'm going to go to you. This is your birthplace, and what's going on there? Women are not allowed to have mace or pepper spray, but you're allowed to carry, I guess, a knife like this. And look what happens. And a dying British citizen who is white at the hands has his hands handcuffed, dragged away, as Jacob put it out. He can't breathe, and he says, "I can't breathe. I can't breathe." It reminds me of George Floyd, but nothing said from the Starmer government, from Sadiq Khan, from nobody in the media wants to, obviously independent journalists, yes. Instead of getting an ambulance, they got in some handcuffs. Your thoughts on this and the death of the Western civilization at the hand of its leaders?
Yeah, it really, I mean, that Henry Novak's death it's horrible. It's actually cruel what was done to him. And,
Yes.
really, really cruel what the police did to him. wicked, actually. Um, and that stands out. But even I think what makes this case particularly shocking is the massive hypocrisy of the UK government and Keir Starmer in particular, who was the embodiment of that hypocrisy and double standards. They don't call him two-tier Keir for nothing, really. And this really shows up. I mean, it took, if it hadn't been for, I think, X and the social media posts about this young man and what was done
Yes.
to him, I think all of this would have been just swept under the carpet. It would never have come out. And it's only now that, a few days ago that Starmer mumbles some kind of wimpy little speech about, and that, and actually, recognizes what's happened. And of course, followed up by, complaints that people who are mentioning this are only doing it for political gain.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel absolutely repelled by the way the UK government has treated this thing. So disgusting. This should bring the government down.
It
Just any
should.
government that, really, because it's based on their policies. You
Yeah.
know,
And I read to you guys earlier, and the policies that is on every police website in the UK.
yeah,
This is their policy. It's a national policy for police that they would actually treat racism, biases above crime, and
yeah,
they would consider that a crime. So they would elevate anything of racism, anything of bias or discrimination as if it was like murder. In this case, they took, like Jacob said, there's no proof of racial slurs or anything like that, but they took that and a man who or young man who's actually being murdered, they actually
yeah.
treat him as the perpetrator. So
This
this
is
is an
on the same
apology.
level as that awful case. And it wasn't Germany. I think it was Sweden. That young girl that was raped by an immigrant.
Mm.
And the judge in the trial, he said, he threw out the rape charge. Why? Because he wasn't raped for long enough.
Oh, yeah,
So
I remember that.
I mean, it's the same, it's on the same kind of level, and it's just you know. Years ago, you remember the Stephen Lawrence inquiry in the UK, that poor young black boy that was murdered, and it
Mm.
looked like the police weren't doing much about it, and they were accused of systemic racism. Yes, there is systemic racism in the police force. There certainly is now, but it's aimed at the white population.
Mm.
And it's not just the police force, the justice system, government, local government, housing, it's all riddled with it now. And it's all comes from, this, all of this comes from the same source. You know,
Yes, the
the,
British Labour Party also has a policy of DEI, even though they
yes,
don't call it that, it's DEI, where you give favor to promoting people based on race. You will promote less qualified people of other color above Caucasians simply because they're people of color. So you've got more
yeah.
higher ranking police officers being promoted based on their skin color. This is exactly what Orwell wanted would happen.
Mm. Jacob, I wanted to ask you this because it's blatantly obvious and it's clear what people are complaining about that this is targeted against British whites,
Yes.
the national population, the origins of the UK, the native population. It's being targeted. You had the rape of young girls in South Yorkshire, right, and Rotherham, and in other places. But it's mainly targeted against the white population, and they've had enough. They've had enough, and there seemed to be a backlash against it.
Slavic pimps pimping off English girls and it being covered up by the Labour Party politicians.
Yes.
That actually happened.
Yeah.
They can do this. It can be known they did it. It can be proven they did it. But if you say they did it, you're an Islamophobe and a racist.
Right.
That is how corrupt it is. And of course, the BBC is no friend of truth.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is the reality of the racism. It's still racism. I was reading an article that the British embassy in Poland, disgusting behavior. They removed tributes to Henry Novak that were posted by Polish people near the British embassy in
Yes.
Poland. They actually removed it because they didn't
Yes.
want to be controversial. So, Jacob, being there, it's just a powder keg that is waiting to happen. I mean, I'm not trying to be alarmist or anything like that, but how far is this going to go?
This was not the first instance of such a thing, and it will not be
Correct.
the last. This is definitely coming to a conflict. That is inevitable. Whenever you had an Islamic invasion of Europe, you'd have a Charles Martel or you'd have a young Sobieski against Islamic armies. This time, however, it is a fifth column.
Mm.
But now it's going beyond even Islam. It's encompassing anybody who's not white. Anybody who's not white is given favor in this two-tier justice system and this two-tier police system and this two-tier promotion system. Social and political conflict can only intensify and get worse.
Right. One of the things that we looked at earlier is that they looked at the Sikh community, and it's interesting. Overwhelmingly, they vote Labour Party, and in fact, in this time around, it actually got worse. They voted for the Greens. They voted more for the Greens. So the Sikh Federation of the UK is seeking more immigration of Sikhs into the UK, and they're
Yes.
seeking Sikhophobia, basically like Islamophobia. You can't say anything about them. Similar to the Hindu community, Hindu phobia. They don't want people to speak about this in a negative way, and they want religious workers and people to come in from those ethnic groups to come in and benefit the British people. I don't think they're going to be very happy. The British people are going to be happy about this, even though Starmer continues to call them racist and extremists. Again, they ignore the public concern and they just call them racist and all kinds of
Well,
things.
what happened in the United States? 31 times, at least 31 times on recorded television, Barack Obama lied to the American people, assuring them and reassuring them that if they like their existing health care plan, they can keep it. He lied 31 times. And when people pointed out that he lied and proved that he lied with news footage, they were called guilty of racism. That is their defense. That is their response. Well,
Yes.
Britain is the same thing, only worse.
Mm.
They
Jay,
immunize themselves from criticism of their corruption by playing a
yeah,
race card.
yeah, that's what they play. Jay, I wanted to ask you this because on the one hand, the British population, the white population are saying, hey, this is the discrimination, white treatment. It's horrible, and they prefer other races. On the other hand, you see this happening more and more. White citizens of the UK turning to Islam, police force, women, and we watched a video together about white woke women from the UK saying that Islam is such a wonderful peace, religion of peace and good for women, safe haven for women.
Did you know that more and more people in Great Britain are now becoming Muslim reverts? More people are finding Islam. And actually, the percentage of British people who are converting to Islam, 75 to 85% of them are women. Now, for people who have no understanding of Islam, who just don't know anything about Islam, they just know what they hear, they think that women are oppressed. But for the women who become Muslim reverts, And I have spent this past week watching the stories of women who've become reverts to Islam, okay? And it's not because of men. They will be single women at the time. Yeah, they often have a deep, there's something that connects them, or they just learn and slowly they feel that Islam is the truth. But single women aren't going to Islam because they think that it oppresses women. It's the opposite. For women, Islam represents a safe, respectful place.
This wasn't just some random video by some random person. This is a movement of women that want Islam, in light of all this, that they want Islam to be their protector. I don't get it. Can you make sense of it?
I mean, you're asking for you're making
Miracle?
sense of nonsense. I guess going back to the 7th century, 6th century is exactly what women want. They want no rights. They want
Hmm.
to be in hijabs in Great Britain, and they definitely want strong men to tell them what to think and what to do. It seems like the British intelligentsia, as far as women, and the idea of women's liberation and women's rights are just nonsense
Hmm.
to most British women, which is
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
crazy because that's what they used to basically attack Christianity as a misogynist religion for the past 20, 30 years. So now, of course, the misogynist Islamic religion is going to replace Christianity, and they have
Oof.
nothing to say. Could it be maybe because, oh, I don't know, the violence against women would be way up if they spoke against
Yeah.
Islam rather than Christianity?
The feminist movement has masculinized women and tried to feminize men. Okay? Women are still women. They're looking for some kind of male leadership. And Western society, Western culture, where men have been feminized and women have been masculinized, no longer provides it. So they'll go to something that does, which is Islam.
Yeah. Extreme.
They just they're too stupid to realize that's what's happening.
Yeah. Surah 34 clearly states women belong to men and they should be beaten. And if they don't do as they are told, that's basically the summary of Surah 34 in regards to a wife or a woman married to a Muslim. So this is where we are. Jacob, the explosion in Paris, the explosion in Brussels, not a literal explosion, but I guess you could say of I guess Muslim gangs, every kind of gang. They won a game. PSG, the football club, won a game. I could imagine if they lost, but it was a war zone. It was a war zone as they looked for any opportunity to riot and set fire to the city. Basically, there was no safe place to be in Brussels or in Paris this past week.
Yes, but this is simply the culmination, climaxing of something that's been incipient for some time. You have to understand when Muslims from Pakistan see a cricket game between England and Pakistan, that is a conflict between Islam and Christianity. They don't just see it as a
Right.
game. They just don't see it. You see that they've done this in Australia. It's not just a game. It is a conflict between cultures and between religious belief systems. That is how Islam, most Muslims, probably most, interpret it and understand it. So this is just a fruition of something that's been fermenting for some time. Anything will give excuse to bring out the violent conflict, even the outcome of a sports event.
Now, let me ask you this. The mural in Newton Abbey, County of Antrim in Northern Ireland, where you have spoken there, and they have this mural. I think I have a picture of it. I'll show it to you. And give me your thoughts on it, because I think eventually this is going to come to play in all forms of society. This is a mural erected there, and it has the warning from Churchill from 1899. but also a warning from Pastor James McConnell's what they call controversial, quote unquote, 2014 sermon regarding Islam as satanic. Islam is a doctrine of hell and has come to the UK, and people are watching this and reading this and coming up to those murals. It has also the list of attacks against the UK by Islam. Are we heading toward, God forbid, but are we heading toward this religious war that it seems to be inevitable as more people wake up to the reality of where they live now?
Newton Abbey is the buckle of the Bible Belt of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. It is a traditional conservative evangelical Protestant area. I did know Jim McConnell, Pastor James McConnell of the church called Whitewell. We strongly disagreed theologically. He had leanings towards oneness, towards Sabellianism, and he was British Israelite. We definitely, the British people are the descendants of the ancient lost tribes of Israel, as he put it. We disagreed on those things. On the other hand, he opposed the Toronto experience. He knew it was nonsense. And secondly, he was right about Islam, and he was arrested and prosecuted in Northern Ireland.
Wow.
His statements about Islam, and Moriel was one of them, one of those who came to his defense. Despite our disagreements with him on other theological issues, we came to his defense about what he was saying about Islam and his right of free speech. He was correct in what he said. I did not agree with him or even like him at the time, but Enoch Powell, who came from what was then Rhodesia, was absolutely right in what he predicted was going to happen demographically. And everybody should read what Winston Churchill said about Islam at the end of the 19th century. Everybody should read what Churchill said about Islam. I know Newton Abbey very well. I speak there regularly.
Is this going to force, is it time for the UK to face this Islamic problem? I mean, for Europe to face Islamic problem. I'm not sure who's going to do it, but it seems to be the British citizens seem to be more concerned.
In Denmark and Sweden, which were the most liberal of European societies towards Islamic immigration, and you have a crackdown and a reaction against it now being undertaken by government policy in both Denmark and Sweden, and even some of the political left are supporting it. So there is a move in play. A similar move is in play in Ireland, but again, it's being opposed by the political establishment, by Sinn Féin, by Fine Gael, Fine Gael. But there's an uprising of the people going against the political mainstream. And of course, it's happening in Britain. It's happening now in Britain with the reform and restore parties, at least to a degree. Yes, there is a reaction. A fizzled reaction perhaps in Italy, but there is an uprising against it. And it will, again, result in a political confrontation, and it will result in violent confrontations between the civilized world and the Muslim world.
Yeah, I think you're right. This is where it's headed. I want to switch over to America and what's going on here. Jake, give me your take, Jacob, on the SAVE Act. We just got betrayed by 4 politicians who, in reality, don't love America, could care less about it. It's called the SAVE Act and proof of citizenship bill. You have to show ID to vote. And Tillis, Collins, Murkowski, and McConnell said, no thanks. We get a lot of benefit from not having it. Go ahead.
These are people in more conservative states who are ideologically Democrats who run as Republicans because they couldn't get elected as Democrats. They are Democrats within the Republican Party. It is absolutely outrageous that Thune is the majority leader in the Senate. It should be somebody like Ted Cruz or Senator Kennedy or someone other like that, as I said before. Thune is bad news. Collins is bad news. But the person who's running against her is even worse than she is. That Plantner is crazy. And then, of course, Murkowski. She is bad news from Alaska and always has been. And Mitch McConnell, again, he was majority leader from Kentucky. He was majority leader in the Senate. They are all ideologically Democrats. They are all Chuck Schumers sitting on the opposite side of the aisle. None of them are to be trusted or respected. Mr. Trump succeeded in getting rid of Massey, succeeded in getting rid of Cassidy, succeeded in getting rid of Cornyn. Well, we must get rid of Murkowski, and we must get rid of Thune. They must primary those people and get rid of them. They will sell the country down the river in 2 seconds because they're
Oh, they
liberal
did.
Democrats in the
They
Republican
did.
Party.
Yeah, I mean, it was 48 to 51. So they basically, all you had to do is get those to vote to save America. That's really what the bill is, Save America Act, in terms of getting.
Like the rhinos will go for it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's terrible.
Like
Another
Bush,
thing,
the rhinos, Cheney.
yeah, another thing that happened in California, and Jay, I'm going to go to you because this touched touched us right to the heart, and um, it doesn't surprise me, but it's always disappointing, right? Trump is actually going after California, saying that the election is being stolen as a result of what is happening. And of course, you have these are the primaries. So these are the primaries. I mean, it's a jungle primary. So the top two, if they don't get 50% of the vote, go automatically to the general election in November. And you had a mayor. There's a mayor race, and they had the governor race. And two Republicans were ahead, seemingly, or at least moving on to the general election. And lo and behold, the votes are not counted yet. And it might take 37 days to get a count. And by the time we got on live today, Steve Hilton and Spencer Pratt were already behind because as votes were coming in that were not counted yet as of Thursday, they were being, those were coming in, were being counted. And lo and behold, they were for the Democratic Party. Jay, your take on that long intro and what you see coming possibly for the mayor race and the governor race.
So let's first of all understand that when we're talking about Karen Bass, we're talking about a mayor who was in Africa as the Pacific Palisades burned down and there was no water to put out the fires. And then, on top of that, they were unable, because of permitting, because of red tape, to begin reconstruction. Massive amounts of insurance prices went up on homes. People lost coverage. And this is all during her tenure as mayor of Los Angeles. Now, let's go move forward to the election. She's the front runner, someone who has failed the city. On top of that, homelessness. She says she's cleaned up the streets. I'm sorry. I have eyes. There's definitely no cleaning up of the streets of Los Angeles. Not from what I'm actually seeing. Perhaps she has different eyes. And again, you have Spencer Pratt, an outsider who's saying, I'd like to try something different. And by the way, if anybody watched any of his ads, of his campaign commercials, far more imaginative, far more entertaining. It was a media blitz, and by far he won. At least that. And now what do you have? They can't win the election, or they can't stack the election enough on the day of actual voting. So how do they solve this problem? Well, we're going to stuff ballot boxes from mail-in ballots. By the way, there's a park where I go and swim, and there's a box saying, drop off your ballot here. Well,
still?
There's no monitoring of that box. There's just a sign saying it's a felony to tamper with federal elections. So how do you even monitor who's putting what ballot in there?
Yeah.
So ballot harvesting in California is very easy. In fact,
no,
I would say
rig
that
it. They know how to rig it. They know how to rig it.
They know exactly how to rig it, and they know exactly how to make up people that live in California. And so that's why I would say that North Korea has a stronger democratic elections than California.
Amen. Amen. About 1 million ghost voters is the estimate revealed. That was revealed in attempt to get this election. That might take 37 more days, Jay. So hang on tight because maybe by July, end of July, we may know. But by now, we know that Steve Hilton, the Republican candidate who was leading, has now fallen behind Tom Steyer. And so now I don't think he's going to be able to run in November.
I'm not sure what the legal framework would be, but I think that we should be legally contesting this election specifically for
Mm,
just absolute
mm,
fraud and
mm.
an upturning of the will of the people. Yes,
Yeah.
I accuse
I mean, I did look at the
Xavier
map.
Becerra and the California government of rigging an election.
Yeah, both the governor
Mm,
race and the mayor race and all the other races, of course, in that. And of course, how can Karen Bass and Nadia Rahman can actually have the face to run after what they did to LA, and let alone Becerra and his
mm,
policies, and at least the other guy is a business guy. I don't really like him, but it's horrific what they've done to the state, which, by the way, Jay, I did look at the map and it's predominantly red, which is doesn't people have asked this question is how can it be predominantly red in most counties and yet you have a state assembly that
mm.
is 99% Democrat?
Because they don't really let people vote. They make up people. They have that's the kind of
Yeah,
money that
and you
California
can see
has.
it.
Being the fourth largest economy in the world, I believe. That's how much money
In the
they
world.
have
Yeah, in the
to
world.
create, yeah, to create people and make them vote what they want them to vote.
Just
Mark, when
make
I
them
That's
was
up.
in
it.
That
California, I recall
yeah,
getting my driver's license renewed at the Division of Motor Vehicles, and they had voter registration booths set up in the motor vehicles office, and
yeah,
anybody, illegal immigrant, didn't have to speak English, anybody could go in there and register to vote. And
yeah,
it's open, just absolutely open. You've got 45% registered Democrats in California, 45% of the electorate are Democrats, 25% are Republicans. Yet, with 45% of the voters as registered Democrats, Democrats have 42 seats in the House.
yeah.
Republicans have. This is how corrupt it is,
Very
how
corrupt.
gerrymandered it is.
And it only gets better. Jay, I'm going to go back to you because, at the dark hour of the night, as most wonderful bills are passed, as we know from history, Bill AB 2017 passed in the state assembly, going to the state senate now, positioning California to be legally institutionalizing theological progressive inclusivity. It sounds like a big time word, and what it literally means is that California could adopt religious holidays from religions and put them into their state calendar as holidays, specifically Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Ha. These are Muslim holidays that want to be recognized as state holidays in California. Schools K through 12 could adopt them if the bill is passed, and there will be justifiable personal absences for students who celebrate those holidays, including community colleges. And if there's enough population of Muslims in that community college, they can actually shut down the campus. It could extend to workplaces. It could give explicit rights for vacations and holidays, without professional or financial repercussions. This is what California is going for, not adopting Christian holidays, not adopting Jewish holidays, but adopting Muslim holidays. Your take on AB 2017?
Well, first of all, I would start with this. I've noticed that any means to make a holiday for more days off for state and local county officials seems to go through really fast. Just another ridiculous payday for bureaucrats and people who couldn't make it in the private sector. Second, I would say this. California has definitely is starting to build the foundations of the IROC, or what I like to call the Islamic Republic of Khalistan. This is coming. And again, I can't wait to hear the new version of the Beach Boys. I wish they could all be in hijabs. I
In
think,
hijabs.
yeah, I think that's coming very soon because,
Have you have you noticed, Jay, that and this is just my own observation from being in California for a long time, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, billboards, freeways, billboards on freeways that called for celebrating Muslim holidays. I've never seen that because the population of Muslims that were practicing Muslims that went to the Friday worship and things like that were never that big. So there was never really a need for maybe some clusters of population. But now it's statewide.
I love what Davey had to say. Davey basically was talking about, you know, the Beach Boys, California Girls is going to be changed
Yeah.
to, I wish they could all be in
Hijab.
hijabs.
Yes. Yeah. Jay, is this a Trojan horse?
Of course it is. Of course it is something. This is this is what we're seeing in Minnesota. And remember that in Minnesota there was all that fraud related to
Yep.
daycares,
Huge.
and
Huge.
well, I mean, Minnesota is a small little drop in the bucket compared to the fraud that goes on in California. What they
Huge.
do in billions, we do in trillions.
Oh, it's
So there's
huge.
money to be made by Islamic grifters right here in good old California or
Yeah.
Calistan.
Yeah, Calistan. And have you seen the growth of that, Jay? I mean, you live in a LA County area, a little bit different county where I live, but have you seen the difference in terms of the amount of not only billboards, but promotion of Muslim holidays and things like that more than ever before? I've never seen anything like that.
I just can't wait till West Hollywood starts putting them up next to the June Pride Month ones. I can't wait for
Oof.
that conflict.
That will be a powder keg, you know. But it's not just California. I mean, we talked about Texas here, voluminous times.
It's throughout the United States.
Hmm.
It's what you see in Great Britain is what you're going to see in the United States. What you see in Australia, you're going to see in the United States. Again, what's really kind of telling is what you saw with that poor gentleman that was basically allowed to die in Great Britain. There's
Yeah.
going to be the same thing happening in America.
Hmm.
Yes.
What can stop it, though? I mean, honestly, I mean, if we have a revival within the believers, perhaps that will make it stop. Yeah, but it seems to be the society's on a, they grease the rails, and it's just speeding up.
Like real leadership, not fake politically correct leadership,
Hmm.
which I don't know if that's even possible in
Yeah.
2026.
I think all current leadership at the moment has lost the respect of the majority of people. The police. People don't respect the police. People don't respect the government anymore. So they're just going to
Right.
act more and more like the boot on the face kind of thing. That's how our governments are going to act because people aren't going to follow them out of respect. So it's only going
Yeah.
to be with the boot on the face.
No, I agree with you, Dave. I think there's so much lost confidence in institutions that, yeah, or even the church, even the church has no credibility, moral credibility with all the false teachers and all the false teachings and all the scandals sexually. That I don't know if there's a way back. This is why people are so blackpilled, Jay, that they don't think it's going to come back in any sort of way. And then people are just sort of hiding out and moving on and tuning out and not really want to participate in anything anymore. And maybe video games is where people are going, or the bars, because they just want to escape from all this.
Yeah. I mean, why is California the center of the rehab industry?
Yep.
Because people want to escape the reality of living in a nightmare state like California.
Yeah, dystopian
Yeah.
in every which way. And it'll come. I mean, a lot of people, when we talk about Texas, Texas has these huge monuments. I think it's the largest Hindu monument, I
Yeah.
want to say in the Western world, but it might be the world. And it's that monkey thing that they have there, and they have another religious temple
Hanuman.
there. Yeah, it's we forget how much multiculturalism has changed the United States, the Judeo-Christian foundation of the United States, of the UK. And not trying to be, doom and gloom all the time, but just face the reality. Face the reality of where we are and look at the voting. Doesn't seem to change.
Well, what you're seeing is a political DEI. We had a cultural DEI with Hollywood to promote that diversity, equity, and inclusion is the best thing since sliced bread. But now the government has taken the DEI brainwashing and has basically put a stamp of approval, and they're
Mm,
moving forward with it. Whatever is actually fringe, that's what they promote. That's what
that's
they
what they do.
actually are trying to protect. They don't
Yeah.
protect majority. They don't protect the electorate. They protect the people who they feel should be the next people propped up and use
Mm,
them as a voting block for their
yeah.
power.
Yeah, and that's I was reading an article and it was very very interesting how media personalities and even independent media personalities like Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly have switched. And it was not an accident because they literally went for demographics. Which one is the demographic that is going to be growing is Islam. It's Hinduism
Yep.
and especially Islam. And they said, well, let's calculate the numbers 2 billion Muslims, 20 million Jews. Which one do you want to support your endeavors? Well, it was quite an easy choice, isn't it? Just to turn away from truth and placate a growing majority is going to support you. And they went for the 2 billion Muslims.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that's just one example. I mean, I think there's a variety of examples that we don't even know about. But if those are the glaring ones where people just decided to switch and say, okay, we went from this kind of diatribe to this kind of diatribe because, hey, it's going to support my channel. We're going to go and make lots of money. Politicians do that all the time. Where's the next voting block? And they found it. Media is the same. Media is the same. Final topic, Elon, I'm going to go to you. It's the LGBT Pride in the month of June. And the month of June is, of course, supposed to be weddings and family. And here in the States, it's Father's Day. But in the rest of the time, the rest of the world seems to be celebrating other things. And in Israel is no different. Elon, describe to me what's going on in the Jerusalem Pride Parade, what happened in the ancient place of Sodom and Gomorrah, June 1st through the 4th, I believe it's where it was. And of course, Tel Aviv. But recently, some major things that politicians are trying to promote the LGBT Pride Parade as a political platform to give more rights to same-sex marriage. So I'll turn it over to you and what you've seen over the years and where it's at today in Israel.
Well, first of all, the Pride Land event
Yeah.
in at Sodom and Gomorrah. Well, it wasn't a repeat of Genesis 19.
Okay,
You
nothing
know,
happened. Yeah.
yeah, they should be grateful for that. But then again, they weren't. It wasn't. You see, um, the Genesis 19 thing really wasn't merely the presence of homosexuality. It was the what's the word? It was the gang rape of visitors that was intended. It was violent and militant in a sense. Um, even going so far as to attempt to sexually assault um, two divine messengers. So, it's more than just the presence of homosexuality. And hmm, yeah, I mean, obviously, we don't particularly, on the one hand, we don't want to see homosexuals and being thrown off rooftops, but that doesn't mean that we approve of the idea of gay marriage, and that itself is an abomination. But I don't. I just wonder when that with this his attempts to to legalize gay marriage or put it on the same basis as heterosexual marriage in Israel.
Right.
I
Right.
don't know how. I cannot see that going very far with the way the demographics are running.
Correct. Correct.
I
Yeah,
think such a
Lapid.
thing would yeah.
Yeah, Lapid
But
promised it.
Lapid,
That's one of it. Yeah.
yes. Well, Lapid makes a lot of promises, and he's getting together with Naftali Bennett, and possibly some. He was thinking of making a coalition with Naftali Bennett. Well, he's allying with Naftali Bennett to hopefully pass the electoral threshold, and then to cobble together some kind of a coalition. You probably have to include some of the anti-Zionist and anti-Israel Arab parties as well. We've spoken about this, um, but this. His idea, really, he's just trying to get people to vote for him, Lapid.
Hmm.
Um, but he's appealing to a dying demographic, a demographic that is actually committing suicide. You know, a portion of the population that's committing demographic suicide anyway, because the
Yeah.
only way that the homosexual, the LGBTQ, whatever population can increase is by recruitment or adoption of
Right.
unfortunate children. So I don't think this thing of Lapid will go very far in the
No,
because
I doubt it. I doubt it. But he's just appealing to the masses in a sense of who they were,
yes,
where they were, and what they want. But because of the Haredis and the ultra-Orthodox and that nation moving to the right, you could see that it's not going to go very far.
yeah, not I mean chronologically, I don't think it will go very far, but it does show something though. I mean, like Tel Aviv, maybe. You might,
Okay.
that if it was just the election was confined to Tel Aviv, probably, yeah. I mean, you would get maybe more people supporting it, because there's also in Tel Aviv you've also got there is a certain degree of tolerance. You've also got an anti-religious um, attitude there. Do you remember that piece we covered a week or two ago about some of the left, were upset that there were religious people actually moving into Tel Aviv.
Yes, yes.
I mean, and it was quite nasty actually. The post that they were putting up on Twitter, it was nasty. It really was. It was someone said this post would sound better in German. You know, uh, so. Yeah, even Tel Aviv, eventually one day it may become a religious city because
Hmm.
as the Orthodox move in there, they'll simply outbreed those who don't
The secular,
reproduce.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. Here in the States, Jay, I'm going to go to you. The polls show that there's actually a downtick support of same-sex marriage. You have an administration that's not too rah, rah, rah for same-sex marriage and trans. They sort of play it back and neutral and promote more family. And so you see this downplay of same-sex marriage, and it's a downtick, actually quite a bit, from about 70% to about 60% in just a few years. There's a partisan divide, no doubt. It's wider and wider. And the Supreme Court gets to hear the case of the 2015 Same-Sex Marriage Act. They might even turn it back to the states. Your thoughts on that? Is there potential for that? And can we be optimistic, just like what happened to Roe v. Wade, it could happen with the Same-Sex Marriage Act?
I would just like to comment that when I say this, I say a, not the. So I remembering back to not the, but a Antichrist, Barack Hussein Obama,
Oh
there
yeah.
was there was this whole issue of Prop 8 in California, which opened the floodgate to legalize same-sex marriage. Now, again, ad nauseum, I'm going to talk about this. The vote was that Californians in the majority said no, marriage should be
Yeah.
defined as one man, one woman.
Prop 8.
And
That was
then
Proposition 8. Yeah.
Proposition 8. And we voted on it. The majority won. And one dictator, fascist judge overturned it. And Obama rubber stamped it. So is it any wonder when something is foisted on us and then basically by propaganda, it has been celebrated as if it were some kind of tolerant thing, the
Hmm.
demographic death of people in the United States so that we can import more of the third world problems. Is it any wonder that people are rejecting the brainwashing?
Hmm.
Look at the demographic cliff. Japan, China, all of these nations are going through. Great
Oh,
Britain,
yes.
and you don't have taxes if you don't have children. And how do you
Yeah.
ensure you don't have children? Push the LGBT trans nonsense.
Hmm.
Pay for and subsidize uh, gender surgery. Put education at the forefront where people are two sexed or two sold. It's brainwashing. And now people are starting to wake up to the fact that it is not tolerant to vote and support national suicide.
Hmm. So true. So true. And Jay, do you get any sort of maybe some kind of hope that these states like Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Tennessee, Alabama are pushing back and saying, no, we're going to call it Father's Day month or Father's Month or Family Month, or we're going to gather for celebrating, marriage between a man and a woman act. These are pushing back that there may be some hope, but at the same time, some polarization comes with it as well.
I mean, I would applaud anyone who would fight the purple hand and actually try to celebrate, things that bring children into the world rather than vice and sin. Um, but do I think that there are a lot of leaders that are willing to go out on the political
Sell out.
ledge and commit, in a sense, suicide? I don't think there's many. But then again, what is leadership but standing in front and protecting the people who are your constituency rather than standing behind them and allowing them to be ran
Yeah, no, he said it right. Davey, you've been down to Melbourne and you in Victoria. That's the capital, and you've seen quite a bit of stuff there. Can you comment, especially what's going on with this man is a woman and a woman is a man? I guess Australia's having its version of what we went with through here in the States about what is a woman, but that comes with the LGBT pride, that comes with transgenderism, that comes with the indoctrination of children and drag queens. So can you comment on that?
Okay. Kind of interesting. Yeah, I hadn't actually been to the city of Melbourne since, gosh, before COVID.
Hmm.
I did go the other day and I caught up with a brother there. And yeah, it was interesting to, I mean, it was great to catch up, with my brother down there. We had a good day of fellowship and that, but it was interesting to see how Melbourne had changed, and there was a little incident there where they had a block cornered off, and I'm thinking, oh, what's going on here? That kind of thing. You could smell there was kind of like something in the air. It didn't smell like burning smoke, but there was something going on there. So I thought, oh, I'll Google my phone to kind of find out, see if there was an incident report on the phone. I couldn't find out what that was, but that we did encounter this other guy who made the news for basically one of those. mentally ill people who's biologically a man who thinks he's a member of the other sex and well endowed physically and was barging through crowds, um,
Oh,
pushing women and children off the trams to make way for his feminine anatomy. So
oh,
look, it's insane. But look, the, at the moment we just had a heap of male pregnancy protection laws, which
yeah. What was that all about? That was just I couldn't wrap my head around.
well, it's kind of crazy because looking at the news just the last couple of days, it looks like they're trying to do the same thing in New York. They're having the same kind of discussions about trying to have these pregnancy laws for men, so that the crazy thing is they always know what a man is when they're talking about it, but then they say they don't know what a woman is and they don't know what a man is, and
Yeah,
they can't define these things, but they give themselves away when they kind of talk that way. But no, this is it is just kind of insane. I love
yeah,
the God made it simple. He made a male and female. You cannot get away from that. Um, it's insane. I really do feel for the children. It's not just June where they ramp things up and indoctrinate the children. We had, I think they call it Ida Hobbit or something like that. Don't ask me what it stands for. It's one of those
yeah.
acronyms. It's one of those days to celebrate. They got so many. They have Lesbian Awareness Day. They have Ida Hobbit Day. They
Oh,
have, Transgender Day of Awareness. On and on and on. There's one just about every month. But just close to us, even in a small country town of a population of not less than 500, I think the population's only around about 200 and something for memory. Um, they had a Ida Hobbit Day on the weekend, Ida Hobbit Festival at the school for children, like at a preschool, I think it was. And I'm thinking, so they're really pushing this stuff on the kids, and it's not just restricted to June here. It's just as
mm,
crazy all year
wow.
round.
Yeah, I remember. I think it was Trudeau who was trying to make the LGBT season, and he wanted to extend it in Canada. And I don't know if it got anywhere, but now it almost seems like it's year round. But the emphasis in June is this sort of season that comes along with it. People may celebrate certain things, but you have, especially during the Biden years, you had a lot of
Mhm.
transgender day, LGBT day, whatever day, and several cabinet members were for it. So it is getting crazy, even though there are some pushback and then a wider gap, I suppose, between people that don't believe in it and don't want to celebrate it, and people that want to promote it and shove it down people's
Yeah.
throat.
Look,
And I
the
think
most
that's where it's at today.
the most disgusting thing is that it's got into the churches now, and that a lot of churches
Oh
are
man,
pushing it. In fact, I
has
think
it has it ever?
somebody reached out to me after last week's catching up from Sydney, and they were just basically saying that they only knew of one church in their area, and this is in Sydney, that wasn't pushing the LGBT kind
Wow.
of stuff. This was in her area, so it's becoming more and more prominent in the churches here, unfortunately.
Oh, I could imagine, and I could imagine, and in Nashville, and close to where Jacob lives, there was this. Heard about it, and I did a quick research, and it was true. Police are trying to, implement this what they call safe place, and they're giving away stickers to businesses in Nashville that are promoting, protection of victims of hate and discrimination. And of course, what they mean by it is LGBTQ community needs to be protected, and they have these rainbow colored stickers, and you put on your businesses, downtown, and it's supposed to designate a safe haven, I suppose, for anyone seeking kind of help. Now, you don't have to get it, you don't have to have it. It's just simply a choice if a business wants to promote that. And of course, this is what happened in Seattle like 10 years ago, where the alphabet mafia went around and recognized who was for them and who was not for them. And they framed those businesses who were not having those stickers as, were threatening them as, with violence. They threatened them with violence because they were framed as this is not a good place for us. It's not safe. So if your business is not safe, it's not, sorry, if your business is not promoting safety for the LGBT community, then guess what? You will be threatened with violence. So you you recognized it right away, Davey, when you told me that this was basically like what the mafia does.
Yep, it's yeah, it's just the old protection racket thing, and that'll come here very quickly. I can guarantee you because there's so many other things that with the endorsement of our government here that are being run like a protection racket. So this will be the next
Oh,
one. I mean, we've got the we've had the t tobacco shop wars and the I'm trying to think of what the latest one is now. But these are all basically a protection racket thing, and it's being actually run outside of our country. It's being basically run in, by rival Islamic mobs overseas.
yeah. It's incredible. It's like being in the 30s and putting a swastika sign on your window. You're bowing the knee. You're basically accepting it to their perverse demands. That's really where it's at today. So, and this is being done, by the way, Davey, with Tennessee tax dollars. This is being done with Tennessee tax dollars. So there should be
Yep.
an uproar about that. We'll talk to Jacob.
Oh,
Maybe we can write a letter.
yeah. It's
Write a
always
letter
done
for it.
with our tax dollars. They wouldn't shed a penny or a nickel or a dime or anything like
No.
that. It's none of their money. It's always the taxpayer money. Yep.
Because they don't care, right? They don't really care except for votes and control, and that's really what they would like. And you mentioned Muslims, right? You mentioned that Islam coming, and it was interesting because people look to at least secular people that don't agree with the homosexuality. They said, well, at least the Muslims don't agree with homosexuality, and I said, well, to a certain extent, theologically, no, they don't on face value, but. Jay, you want to comment on our Muslim student who called in to a show and asked his, I guess you would say his Muslim cleric to say, hey, if I do this for the promotion of Islam, am I going to be forgiven? This is a serious question. This is not some spoof show. This was a reality that Muslim young men want to know.
رضي الله عنكم أن أقوم بعملية استشهادية وتقدمت إلى الشيخ أبو الدماء الغصاب فقال لي إننا ابتكرنا طريقة جديدة وغير مسبوقة في العمليات الاستشهادية وهو أن يلاك في دبرك كبسولات تفجير ولكي تتدرب على هذه الطريقة الجهادية لابد أن ترضى أن يلاط بك فترة كي يتسع دبرك وتكون مؤخرتك قادرة على أن تتحمل عبوة التفجير وسؤالي رحمك الله هل يجوز أن أبيح دبري لأحد الإخوة المجاهدين إذا كانت النية صالحة والهدف الدربة على الجهاد يعني يمكن تدريب على الجهاد ليقوم بتوسيع دبري فحمد الله الشيخ وأثنى عليه وقال الأصل في أن اللواط محرم ولا يجوز غير أن الجهاد أولى فهو سنام الإسلام وإن كان سنام الإسلام لا يتحقق إلا باللواط فلا بأس فيه فالقاعدة الفقهية تقول الضرورات تبيح المحظورات وما لا يتحقق الواجب إلا به فهو واجب وليس هناك أوجب من الجهاد وعليك أن يلاط بك.
Yeah, Muslim men want to know, can they do the acts of homosexuals so that they can plant bombs in a certain portion of their body? This is the sick degeneracy that obviously, first of all, it takes a mentally sick person to even conceive the idea of turning an act like that into a means by which to foment terrorism. Seems
Yeah.
like a match made in Allah's heaven.
Oh. So this young man was willing to be sodomized in order to promote Islam, and I guess if it promotes Islam is what the Muslim cleric said is normally it's forbidden, but for jihad, totally allowed. So go ahead and be sodomized by the mujahideen, and so that you can actually promote Islam. Elon, what do you think? That this was not a spoof. This is actually some serious Muslim cleric questions that they take regarding homosexuality within the Muslim community.
Yeah, I've this goes back to wasn't there something we discussed on catching up, but maybe it was a month or so ago about I mean, what's the term they used? Anal jihad.
Anal jihad,
Do you
that's
remember
it.
I was
Yeah.
thinking, oh, good grief, Uh, uh, so officially, you Islam disapproves of homosexual practice, unless, of course, it's for the cause of murdering and killing non-Muslims, and then you can get a get out of a trip off the top of a hotel free card, you know.
Yeah.
Um, y- yeah. So yeah, it's just utterly depraved, isn't it? Everything about it.
Oh,
I don't even want
absolutely.
to go into the details of what this student really, the question he asked, but he was asking if he could be
Sodomized, basically.
yeah, but if it was permissible to be buggered by other men so that he could enlarge his back passage enough to stick a piece of dynamite up there or whatever he wanted, something like that. Yeah,
I guess it's
you know,
allowed
you
in Islam. I guess it is allowed. Uh,
yes, under certain circumstances, yeah.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I'm just
I,
wondering, are the 72 virgins that person receives male or female?
that's a
oh,
good
good question.
question.
That's a
Yeah.
that's a good question. Are they all repressed and gay, Elon, and they just have to come out and do it, underhandedly?
Well, it does make you think a little bit because you've got this thing that goes on in Afghanistan,
With the
not
Machi
just in
Yes.
boys.
Afghanistan. That's it. Yeah,
Mm.
you've got those little boys that they have, that they have doing seductive dances and things because they can't use women, so they use boys.
Yeah.
And there are certain sayings in that kind of community, where one of them is, women are for bearing children, goats are for relief, and little boys are for pleasure. This kind of,
Are they Greek?
oh, well, yeah,
But it takes you back to when we went up to Caesarea,
Philippi.
yes,
Philippi,
yes,
yeah,
that's it.
where they
Yes,
used to do horrible things with the goats and things up
Yeah.
there.
yes.
It's no
There was
different.
they were sodomizing goats and then throwing them in the whirlpool. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. All in the name of Allah, I guess. That's the name
Yes.
of the game. I guess Jay, we're not taking any money from Qatar because or any Muslim organizations as other ones do because
I'm
we actually talk about these things.
if we are, we're going to be canceled tomorrow. The check's going to be, going to definitely bounce if we are.
Yeah.
Well,
Maybe
let's look at the dangerous trends that are taking place in the United States now, following on footsteps virtually of Great Britain. One is an organized political effort, well funded, to get a Muslim voting bloc, to get more Muslims in Congress, an organized bloc of votes to align themselves with Preamble, Omar, etc., and J-POL. The second thing you're seeing is a woke left having its counterpart on the vote white with Tucker Carlson, with Candace Owen, etc. These things are gaining momentum rather quickly, and they need to be noticed, and they need to be noticed now. The Democratic Party, the old traditional blue dog Democrats, have been subverted by the extreme left. Now you have the same kind of thing taking place among the Republicans. But again, in the country that was the victim of 9/11, have an Islamic voting bloc, being allowed to take root and gain any kind of momentum is unthinkable. It should be unthinkable. It should be unthinkable. And as it is a testimony against Islamic immigration. People like Mamdani and his parents never should have been allowed in the country to begin with, let alone to
Yeah.
run for public office. You cannot be a fundamentalist Muslim and a loyal American. You cannot be both. You cannot have a loyalty to the Constitution and a loyalty to the teachings of Islam. They are fundamentally incompatible.
Yeah.
You mentioned New York, Jacob, and of course, Kathy Hochul wants more Muslims and wants to redefine what a mother and a father is. I want to take it away from legislation and just call people from like gestating parents. So if you want to adopt someone, you can't just say you're going to be a dad or a father. You can't be a mother. It's just if you want to have babies, it's just a gestating parent or a non-gestating parent. So importing Muslims and taking down families. That's really the name of the game in New York now.
Yes. And there's people who will vote for her.
Yeah, yeah. It just this is why a lot of people are so pessimistic about the future and knowing what's going to happen. So this is why people are so pessimistic. I call them black pill because they don't see a way out.
No.
Yeah.
Again,
But
let's not forget
we
that
do know a way out.
yes, they have a future strategy, a future political aim based on Generation Z or Generation Z. They know that they have indoctrinated instead of educated and taught young people what to think instead of how to think. So the idea of having a rational decision based on evidence and facts and coming to a political conclusion or a determination as to who you're going to vote for, the intellectual basis for that kind of reasoning is gone. A lot of young, it's again, I go back to George Orwell. What he said was, whenever you try to force wealth redistribution, which is what Mamdani is doing in New York, whenever you try to force wealth redistribution, it inevitably leads to mass poverty. Now, Orwell said that. Orwell said that. And they're doing it and voting for it.
Yeah. Just on the population itself, Jacob, just recently just read the polls just because it comes out every few months, every few, maybe a year or two. They have this, where each generation is by voting block. Right? So you got the greatest generation, then you have the next generation would be the silent generation, Generation X, and then of course you have millennials and Gen X and Gen Zs, and ultimately the new one is Gen Alpha. And the way it looks, it's Gen Alpha is so small in comparison to the millennial generation. So by the time Generation X retires, the population is so small they won't be able to, well, number one, Generation Alpha won't be able to vote anything in because they're so small. And it'll be left up to the largest generation in the last few generations have been millennials, and they are very woke. They're very leftist, very anti-Israel, very anti-Semitic, and but there won't be any money for anybody because they'll have to be taxed so high in order to have any security because there's just not enough people in the workplace. So you're going to have enormous taxes just to sustain it. So this is why a lot of people are so pessimistic about the future. But Jacob, tell me, why should I be optimistic as a Christian?
Because Jesus is coming and he's coming soon. That's the only reason.
That's hallelujah. Amen. 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 And so, as much as we say the bad news, there's also good news. Repent and believe in the gospel. Repent and believe in Jesus. He's coming back and he's going to make this right. So we're going to go to backstage to get the questions in. We just got the questions in. Jacob's got the answers through the scriptures, and we're going to be asking everybody else what we think. Thank you for your questions. We'll see you back in 1 or 2 minutes as we recalibrate and get going for the last part of our episode, which is question and answer. So we'll see you in just a couple of minutes.
Well, some people call it backstage. I like to call it audience inquisition, where the audience decides to put Jacob through maybe not the Spanish Inquisition, but the YouTube and Rumble Inquisition. That being the case, we have a bunch of questions and we have Jacob to ask these questions of. Jacob, are you ready to answer?
We'll do our best. I hope I don't need a Bible.
You will need a Bible, possibly.
Okay, David, can you get me a Bible, please?
The first question is, when the Torah says a sinner must be cut off from his people, Hebrew, karaf, is this execution, death, or excommunication? The reference is Numbers 15, verse 30.
Okay, that same word is also used predicting the death of the Messiah will be cut off and have nothing in Daniel chapter 9. So it could have that implication of death. But give me the exact verse again.
It is Numbers 15, verse 30.
But the person who does anything presumptuously, whether he's a native born or a stranger, that one brings reproach to the Lord. He shall be cut off from among his people, because he's despised the word of the Lord. And essentially, the term is normally used for capital execution. That is the normal usage. And it's used as a prophecy for Jesus in the 9th chapter of Daniel.
Okay. Thank you,
You've also
Jacob.
got that term in there, presumptuously. That's what happens to false prophets as well. They're presumptuous, and there's a death penalty for that. So that reinforces it as well. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Second question: what does Jacob think of Alberta having a referendum to separate from Canada, and will it mean that Alberta may become part of the United States of America?
It is certainly Alberta. To a lesser degree, it is also Manitoba and Saskatchewan, and even northern and eastern areas of British Columbia and possibly Yukon. It's not just Alberta. Essentially, Canada has become 3 countries being held together by a flimsy legal tradition and heritage. You've got Quebec, which is only still in Canada because it is bribed through the equalization laws that the Western provinces are using their mineral wealth to subsidize the economy of Quebec to give them an incentive to remain Canadian. But since the 1970s, there's been a growing independence nationalist movement among the Quebecois. So that's one Canada. Secondly, you've got the establishment, which is based mainly in Ontario and British Columbia. Ontario in the east and British Columbia in the west, which I would make a comparison to California and New York. Ultra-liberal strongholds on both the west coast and the east of Canada. The maritime provinces, New Brunswick and Newfoundland and things like this, are more aligned with Ontario as well. The third Canada is the heartland of the Great Plains, that which goes east of the Canadian Rockies. But the epicenter is Alberta. Alberta has the highest oil wealth. And if I was a Canadian who was a resident of Alberta, I would definitely want secession from Ottawa. I would definitely move for secession from Ottawa. One complication that you would have is the following, that Alberta would be landlocked. It would be landlocked. It would not have access to a port. So it would be in the political interests of people from Alberta to align with the United States. Right now, it is probably about a third of the voters in Alberta want to secede from Ottawa. And within that, there's a movement that would want to be American. That is definitely true. There have been increased numbers of Canadians leaving Canada, coming to the United States to get away from the policies of the Trudeau government and now the Carney government. This began in earnest with COVID. Canadians coming south just to get away from what Trudeau and Carney have done to Canada politically, legally, and economically. Additionally, they want to control their mineral wealth. They dislike this equalization law where their assets are taken by the central government and distributed to the benefit of other provinces who don't like them and who they don't like. Texas benefits from the Permian Basin. Alaska benefits from the Klondike oil, as does Oklahoma. Louisiana benefits from the offshore oil rigs in the Gulf of Mexico. And Canada, it's not like that. The equalization laws distribute the economic benefit of the oil production. And this is one of the things that is certainly driving the independence movement in Alberta. I myself, if I lived in Alberta as a Canadian citizen, I would want to leave Ottawa. Unless there was a radical change in Canadian politics, where you got rid of the political left, unless that happened, I see no other way out other than to move for independence. But I do think that this could spread. If Alberta did it, it would inspire or give impetus to similar movements in both Manitoba and Saskatchewan. That would extend all the way up to Hudson Bay, from Hudson Bay to the American border. I absolutely could see how that could happen unless there is a radical change in Canadian politics. Now, obviously, the establishment in Ottawa and Toronto are going to fight this tooth and nail. It will not happen overnight.
Thank you, Jacob. The next question. Jacob, since Nebuchadnezzar's image in Daniel 3 was tied to music and enforced worship, could the Antichrist likewise be associated with a universal song or anthem linked to allegiance?
Yes, we have talked about that on our teaching tape on Daniel chapter 3, and how Nebuchadnezzar's image, particularly in the Aramaic text, the numerals of the Shet, being the Aramaic equivalent of the Hebrew Shesh, 6, how is a type of the mark of the image of the beast of Revelation. Nebuchadnezzar's image is an absolute foreshadow prophetically of the image of the beast of Revelation. And one of the things we talk about is how music is going to be used to control worship. Now, what we've connected this with is how that has happened in the church, how people, even among believers, are getting their theology from singing choruses, even though the lyrics may not be biblical. They're getting their theology from the so-called 7-11 choruses, singing the same 7 words 11 times. In other words, what Hindus call a mantra, a mantra. This began with the Vineyard Hymn Book. It's certainly in Hillsong. It was in the River Song for Pensacola. People were actually getting their theology from singing these things. Well, the church is already being seduced to this misuse of music with repetitive lyrics, something Jesus warned about, repeating empty phrases as the heathen do. So the answer to your question is broadly yes, but I would refer you to the teaching we have on Daniel chapter 3.
Thank you, Jacob. Your opinion, Elon, Jacob, on Michael Heiser.
Mike Heiser, he's no longer alive. He gave up the ghost about 4 years ago, maybe. I think about 4 years ago already, 3 to 4 years ago at least. Michael Heiser was an interesting scholar. I agree with some of what he said, but I do not agree with his main thesis. I just do not.
Elon, any comments?
Yeah, well, I would kind of concur with that. I mean, I think he had some interesting things to say, but it also seemed it went a little bit too far. Um, you know, I think he was. If it's a while since I looked at any of his materials, but it seemed that too much what's the word? Too much weight was given to things like the Book of Enoch and stuff like that. That's one thing, and it's like sometimes you can get someone who who discovers something in Scripture, but then he makes everything else in Scripture about that thing. And that's the feeling I got with Michael Heiser,
Yes.
that he was reading heavenly counsel into just about everything.
Yes, particularly the account of Micaiah's vision of the demons before the Lord, God sending a lying spirit. That's one of his focal texts.
Yeah, yes, and it was just like, oh, it was just going too far in that direction, I think. So, Michael Heiser's material I'd handle with extreme care.
All right, you heard it here. Jacob, is there any biblical basis for the tradition that Elijah may one day appear to drink the fifth cup at a Passover Seder?
That is based on a rabbinic tradition added to the Seder. It's become sort of a game you play with children now at the end of the Seder. From the later rabbinic interpretation from the book of Micah, chapter 5, the close of the book of Micah, that Elijah would return one day. And their belief was that he would either come at Hanukkah or at Passover. That was their belief. And so it is simply a rabbinic tradition that is added to the Haggadah. Do I think that Elijah is coming again in some way? Yes. Do I think he's one of the two witnesses? That does not seem improbable. But we have to draw a distinction between what is directly stated. Jesus made it clear, speaking of John the Baptist, Elijah is coming, but I tell you, he has come. So Jesus made it clear that John the Baptist had the spirit of Elijah, but in some way, Elijah is coming again. Now, the question will be, will that be actually Elijah, Eliyahu Hanavi? Or will it be somebody who has the spirit of Elijah, the way John the Baptist did? Remember, Elijah, Elisha, and John the Baptist, Yochanan HaMatpil, all have the same spirit. So when somebody comes in the spirit of Elijah, is it going to be Elijah, or is it going to be somebody like John the Baptist? That is another question. We can look at those issues, but the cup, and it's a game you play with little kids. Like you take a sip of the cup and you say, oh, Elijah was just here and you missed it. And the children run around looking for Elijah. It's a children's game that's been incorporated by rabbinic invention into the Paschal festivities. That's basically what it comes to. Elon?
Yes, yeah. The idea of Elijah coming, as Yaakov said, that's absolutely scriptural. And he will come before the day of the Lord. But the
Yes.
idea of him being attached to Passover, that's a rabbinic invention. So.
Thank you, gentlemen. If the third temple needs to be rededicated, I am assuming for the millennial reign, are the measurements and instructions in Ezekiel 40 through 46 part of the rededication? Commentaries differ.
The tribulational temple of Revelation 11 is the tribulational temple. Now, what is possible is the millennial temple will be a rededication of the tribulational temple that was defiled by Antichrist, much the same as the temple of Zerubbabel, okay? The second temple was rededicated by the Maccabees after being defiled by Antiochus Epiphanes, by Antiochus IV. That is the question. Is the millennial temple going to be a separate edifice, or will it be a rededication, a reconsecration of the defiled edifice? It would seem to me it could be a rededication of the defiled edifice. That is, the tribulational temple is reconsecrated the way the Maccabees reconsecrated the second temple. Also, there could be an expansion of it. Ezekiel shows us an expansion. So when the Messiah comes, there could be an architectural enhancement an expansion of it.
Mhm.
Herod the Great, curiously, tried to fulfill the prophecies of Ezekiel using Greco-Roman architecture and expand the Second Temple. Took him over 30 years to do it. Again, that might suggest that he was trying to put himself in the position of the Messiah who would expand the, the temple. So when Jesus comes, in other words, it could be a rededication of the defiled temple in the character of the Maccabees, rededicating the defiled temple, but it could also be a messianic expansion of it, matching the descriptions in the second half of the book of Ezekiel. That is the best of my understanding.
Mm. All right. Thank you, Jacob. After his resurrection, did Jesus ascend to heaven twice, or was there only one ascension described in Scripture?
When Jesus gave up the ghost, he said, Father, into your hands I give my spirit. Okay. His spirit is one thing, but his spirit was reunited with his body in the resurrection. We know that he descended into Sheol, into Hades, and revealed himself to the faithful Old Testament saints. He revealed himself to the faithful Old Testament saints. They could not enter paradise until the Messiah came. They were in a place of waiting in the bosom of Abraham. So he went to the bosom of Abraham, and in the physical, literal resurrection, then his spirit comes back into his body. That is when he physically, literally ascended to his Father at the ascension. So what his spirit did is one thing. What his body did when it's reunited with his spirit or reinvigorated by his spirit is another. There's two things. Now that applies to all of us. If we give up the ghost before the Lord comes, our spirit and our soul will go one place, but then it'll again be reunited with the body in the resurrection. So it's a two-phase process. Jesus is simply the prototype of it happening to us. What happened to him will happen to us. There's two phases. One only involving the spirit and soul, the second involving the spirit, soul, and body. So in that sense, there's two.
Okay. Jacob, what do you identify the seventh head of the beast as?
I can tell you what various people have said about it. One popular consensus is that he's one of the seven. That was and is not and is to come. That it will be the Antichrist himself. That is the popular view. I myself am not 100% dogmatic concerning it, but I can appreciate the reasons for the argument that it is the Antichrist at present. Elon?
Yeah, it does say. Let's just get the text up actually, because there's the seventh, and then there's just let me find it. I'll just get
It begins in
into
Daniel chapter 7 and goes all the way into Revelation.
yeah. Hold on. I'll just open the text. I'm looking at the wrong text here. 7 horns and 10. Yeah, but there's one that is. It talks about the eighth is one of the seven, if I remember rightly.
Correct.
10. Yeah. It. That's Revelation 17. Yeah, I think. Sorry. Yeah, it's one of those things where it's difficult to say with certainty. Um,
At the present time.
yes, and so any answer is partly speculative, informed speculation, but not. It's not. You can't say this with certainty. Yeah. Yeah, the seven heads are seven mountains on which the woman is seated. They are also seven kings. Five of whom have fallen, one is, the other has not yet come. When he does come, he will remain on this. And as for the beast that was and is not, it is an eighth, but it belongs to the seven. So one of those, if the eighth is indeed the Antichrist, he is also one of the seven. So,
Yes.
you know, but so I would, I would just not read into that more than the text says. It does appear that the one of the seven horns is the Antichrist, but he's also the eighth. The fact that he has two places there might be due to the fact that he has a mortal wound and is healed.
Yes.
That might be to
Yes.
do with that.
Yes.
But I wouldn't over, what's the word? I wouldn't over speculate and say something absolutely about that verse. But there's some things that are still a little mysterious to us.
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen. The next question, Chica, we recently did a video where you were in front of Mount Hermon, and then we also were talking about on Catching Up with Jacob about UFOs. In the video, you stated regarding the UFO video shared by Moriel, Jacob, you said, paraphrase, and warned against Nephilim conspiracy theories. Can you please share the difference between what Moriel believes versus Nephilim conspiracy theories?
Okay. The conspiracy theories are too many and diverse to comment on every one of them. But some people say that these things exist, that the government knows it exists and they're keeping it secret, and that actual corpses of UFOs, of UFO travelers, are being held at an Air Force base in Dayton, Ohio. People say that. Other reports say that these things are small, not big. They're only 2 foot tall, not very big. So it's it is a convoluted mess of speculative things that people are becoming obsessed in looking at instead of focusing on what Scripture says. Scriptures do tell us Jesus was emphatic and unambiguous, just as it was in the days of Noah. In the days of Noah, you did have these demonic manifestations falling from the sky, falling from heaven. Jewish history tells us in the book of Jared that they came down during the reign of Jared to Mount Hermon, which is where Jesus ascended when the transfiguration was. I do believe that there will be extraterrestrial phenomena that are demonic in origin. I do believe that is going to happen. It will be part of the Antichrist deception. But to go beyond that and to say that the government knows this and is being kept secret from us, or there's no end to what conspiracy theorists are saying about UFOs and even those trying to link it to the Nephilim. We have to be very, very careful. Others have even gone so far as to say, because they were in the land after the flood, that they're still around. You know what I mean? That these things are still around on the earth. That Joshua didn't kill them all. Called the Anakim, the Anakim. Another term is Gibborim, the great ones. The evidence they cite is Goliath. Goliath was one of them. And also Goliath's brother, who had the 6 fingers and the 6 toes, okay, which again resembles the 666, resembles the combination of sixes. So there are things of which we can intelligently discuss, but we must be very careful not to deviate into speculations and conspiracy theories. We must be very careful to focus on what the Bible actually says.
I'm just going to make one comment from what I've seen when it comes to the Christian conspiracy theories regarding them.
Yes.
To generalize, I can sum it up into two general ones that I see, and they go with the two different camps, the pre-trib camp and the NAR camp. The NAR camp are basically saying, and it goes in with their spiritual warfare. They're basically saying the old ways of doing spiritual warfare aren't going to cut it. You're going to need to, you know, these new spiritual warfare techniques. So there's that conspiracy side with the NAR, and then the pre-trib say they're basically there to explain away the rapture. You know, so once the pre-trib rapture happens, you know, and everybody's wondering where everybody's gone to, they'll use the aliens as the excuse. That's where they're gone to. They're the two main Christian conspiracy ones that are out there that I see. Both of them are pretty big at the moment too.
The prophet Nahum prophesied the end of Nineveh. When did this happen after the prophet Jonah preached the city and it repented?
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. The prophet Nahum prophesied the end of Nineveh.
Yes.
When did this happen after Jonah preached and the city repented?
It happened well after the time, the exact year I cannot recall offhand, but it happened well after the time of Jonah. It would have been when the Babylonians overtook the Assyrians.
Yeah, 6112 BC.
That's right, around there. Thank you.
Thank you, Elon. Thank you, Jacob. What is your thought about Christine Darg and her ministry among Middle East Muslims? Christine Darg recently appeared in a video of Sirah International. I'm troubled by her extreme charismatic views of the appearance of Jesus videos. Revival is breaking out across the Middle East.
I've known about Christine since the 1980s. I make no judgments about her as a believer or her motives, but I've always found her to be rather biblically flimsy. She is rather doctrinally, she's not well grounded doctrinally, and she has a hyper charismatic inkling. I've never been able to endorse her ministry, and I would not advise anyone to lend much credence to the things she says. She is too weak doctrinally, and she's too experiential in her theology.
Yeah, she had, there was some connection, I think, between her and Ma'oz at some point.
Yes.
So that also is something of concern. Ma'oz is was the ministry of Ari and Shira Sorko Ram.
Very bad.
So yeah, there was some connection there. So that's enough of that. That would be enough to raise the hairs on the back of my neck.
Anyone, yes.
All right. Next question. Could the removal of the daily sacrifices by the Antichrist also be the removal of the Holy Communion by which we remember Christ's sacrifice?
I see no basis to present that as a thesis. I really don't. I don't see any biblical argumentation supporting that kind of a scenario. Elon?
Yeah, it's a bit far. Yeah, the connect. There's no real connection between the two at all. So it's so the answer is no.
The most common error with that particular verse or passage are those people saying that somehow the ministry of Jesus was 7 years, which they don't explain, but saying that when he died on the cross, that put an end to sacrifices. These people wind up confusing Christ from verse 27 with the Antichrist. They identify the Antichrist as Christ because they say when he died on the cross, that was the end to sacrifices. But that does not fit the context because where was Jesus' ministry ever 7 years? It wasn't. It was 3.5.
Mm.
We are told that when children die, they return to God. If I am praying for a critically sick boy, if he passes, will he go to God?
Jesus stated, "Suffer the little children unto me, theirs is the kingdom of heaven." The scriptures also tell us, "Blessed is the one who the Lord does not take their sin into account." Does the baby have sin? Yes, it has a fallen nature. Was conceived in sin, as we all are. The baby has a fallen nature. Does God hold their sin against them? No, no, he does not. There is a security in knowing that a child who dies in early childhood or as a baby does not face condemnation. Now, there are unfortunately some Calvinists, not all of them, but there are definitely some Calvinists who say the babies go to hell because of their perverted view of election and predestination. They say by virtue of the fact that the baby died not accepting Christ means they're in hell. I do not believe this. Jesus made it clear, theirs is the kingdom of heaven. I do believe that babies and small children who give up the ghost before reaching an age of accountability are with the Lord.
Okay. Jacob, in light of 2 Thessalonians 2, verse 4, why is Israel building a third temple, knowing the Antichrist will rule from there?
They don't know it's the Antichrist. They're going to be deceived by him. That's precisely the problem. Having rejected the true Christ, they'll be bamboozled by a false one. That's precisely the problem.
Yes. Interestingly enough, in the interview with Yehuda Glick, he was asked a question very much in that vein, and he was kind of working his way around it. You know, it seemed to me that the question was being dodged a little bit, and I would say that is symptomatic of of avoiding that text in Daniel. Because it doesn't really quite fit the narrative.
Thank you, Elon. That's exactly where I was going to go with that. If you would like to know more, please, we have made it available on Vimeo and on Moriel.org. When a state, when a nation influences prophecy, it's available and you can watch the full interview. And yes, that was a very successful dodge to that question. We had two questions that pretty much aligned with your question, and you get it directly from the person who's the head of the Temple Institute. So you can have your question answered for, if you'd like to rent, it's very cheap on Vimeo. Greetings to you all. Jacob, on which of the 7 heads are the 10 horns in Revelation?
We'd have to go into a whole Bible study on Revelation, then beginning in Daniel 7 through Revelation 17, to begin to understand the relationship between the heads and the horns, okay? Obviously, the 10 horns will ultimately go on the Antichrist. The popular view is, and it's the one that would on the surface seem to make the most sense, is that the 8th beast will be one of the 7, as Elon pointed out, quite possibly the counterfeit of the resurrection of Christ. That is the one. That would seem to be. But I would not want to answer the question unless I could answer it comprehensively. And we could not do that in a Q&A. We'd have to have a whole Bible study looking at it.
All right. Well, stay tuned. Maybe we will definitely try to work that into the program. Davey, what's your opinion on Mari Emanuel?
Okay. I really haven't listened to any of his teaching, so I really can't comment that way. One good thing, he has been vocal in speaking out against Islam and the whole LGBT kind of stuff, which is probably what led to him being attacked by that Muslim that time in the church. I do know he's either Syrian or a Syrian Christian, which is, I think, Eastern Orthodox. in tradition, but I don't know how strict he sticks to that, because I think his church is independent. He's independent from that. So, but yeah, that's about as much as I can comment. It's good that he's been speaking out on the issues he's been speaking out on, but where he stands theologically, I haven't listened to any of his sermons or that, even though I know he's got plenty up on YouTube.
Right. Thank you, Davey. Final question. We got through them all. Wow. Can Jacob share his thoughts on Nick Matau, Matau, and his debates against various anti-Israel interests?
I'm in broad agreement with his apologia, his apologetics on behalf of Israel, and I'm in broad agreement with his statements concerning the usual anti-Zionist arguments. I'm in broad agreement, but I would have to leave it at that.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And with that, that is our final question for this week. Thank you so much for sticking with us all this time. We can't wait to see you next week. We'll have another great show of Catching Up with Jacob. If I could possibly ask Elon to give a final encouragement to the people out there this evening or morning for him. Elon, would you mind just giving a brief statement?
Well, I think I would go along with what I think it was Marco that said earlier on before we went to backstage. You know, everything can look very, very black, you know, and there's no going back to you know, the way life was 30 or 40 years ago when things looked better. So the only thing to do is to look ahead and look to, you know, the great positive that I know I say this repeatedly, the great positive that we have is the hope of the Lord's return, you know, and that is the only thing that can sometimes keep you sane in a world that's going mad. So that's what I would, we should fix our eyes upon, you know, really on the Lord's return and being ready for Him, and that will give us at least some. So that's light in the darkness, as Peter said. You know that the prophecies of the prophetic scriptures are like a lamp burning in a dark place. You know, and without that hope, life would be very dark indeed. So, you know, fix our eyes upon the Lord's coming kingdom and the hope that is
Yes.
set before us.
Amen. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jacob. Thank you, Davey. Thank you, Elon, for sticking with us. Thank you, Marco, even though you're already gone. Hopefully we'll see you all next week. God bless.